Chapter 443. Not to mention, Kuang Yi didn't know that Yang Qindong had a large warehouse and many powerful weapons from hundreds of years later. He didn't think highly of Yang Qindong just from the number of troops. Even if he believed that this army could fight, it shouldn't be like this. From this point of view, Ying Zong didn't have any sincerity at all, not to mention asking for Bai Ming's approval. That was even more impossible. Think about it, the southern Ming had internal strife. What did it have to do with Bai Ming? They couldn't wait to see a joke. In order to solve the problem, Ying Zong wanted their approval to be bestowed the title of king. This was simply unrealistic. Just like when Mu Bin was bestowed the title of king of Shiping, why didn't he say anything to Bai Ming? Now that Yang Qindong was about to be bestowed the title of king, he remembered everything. If this wasn't artificial difficulties, then what was? Of course, these were all Kuang Ye's thoughts. As a subject of the great Ming, he couldn't question the emperor's decision. Now he was thinking about how to explain this matter to Yang Qindong clearly. He wasn't even sure if Yang Qindong would be angry and make things difficult for him if he read this decree. Others definitely wouldn't, but when it came to Yang Qindong, everything was possible. Kuang Yi couldn't make up his mind, so he called Guanyin, Ma Wei and Yu Guang over. He first showed them the emperor's decree, then asked with a helpless expression, "Do the three generals have any ideas?" After the three of them read it, their expressions became very ugly. They could clearly see that Ying Zong didn't want to be bestowed the title of king. However, they were just some insignificant or border officials. What ideas could they have? Just like this, the three of them were silent for a long time. When Kuang Yi was a little impatient, Guanyin carefully said, "Teacher, this matter should be discussed with the Duke of Loyalty and see if there are any other conditions. As for the location, I think Gaozhou City is more suitable." The reason why Guanyin said this was because he had the same thought as Kuang Yi. He was also afraid that Yang Qindong would suddenly attack. It was different in the city. After all, this was their territory. Even if they wanted to make a move, the other party would have some scruples. Yes. Kuang Yi nodded, he understood Guanyin's meaning and said, "Since that's the case, you should personally go to the mercenary camp. Regardless of whether you can meet the Duke of Loyalty or not, just tell him that you want to discuss this matter." "I understand." Guanyin nodded. Cold Front Barracks. Zhu Qizhen's decision regarding Ying Zong had been sent over yesterday. With a powerful eunuch like Mao Mu in the palace and the fact that this matter was not a secret to begin with, he had informed the Yangxie Security Bureau personnel in the city. Yang Qindong, who had received this information a day earlier, let out a long sigh after reading it. He knew that he had underestimated the situation. He was different from Mu Bin. Yang Qindong knew this very well. Mu Bin had only lived in Yunnan for a long time and his influence was limited there. Moreover, most of the soldiers under his command belonged to the imperial court. In other words, if he made any strange moves, those soldiers might not listen to him. However, he was different. He had the most elite mercenary army in the world. That was an existence that everyone was afraid of. In addition, when he was in Bai Ming, he had the ability to overthrow the Minister of Justice, Yu Shiyue. This kind of influence was not something that a mere Mu family could achieve. It was precisely because his influence was not limited to one place that it was normal for Zhu Qizhen to be on guard against him. Under such circumstances, how could Zhu Qizhen give him the title of king? If it were someone else, if he was not given the title of king, he would withdraw his troops. In any case, his headquarters was in Bai Ming. Now Bai Ming was still very safe. At worst, he could just return to Yang Village and do whatever he wanted with the outside world. However, Yang Qindong's goal was set long ago. He could not let go of this no matter what. Especially since this war involved Jiaoji. Jiaoji was definitely a foreign race. He could not allow the foreign race to oppress and invade the Han people. In other words, regardless of whether Ying Zong agreed to give him the title of king or not, he would not give him even the slightest benefit. If he had to send troops, he would still send troops. A bitter smile appeared on Yang Qindong's face as he felt like he was being held hostage. Then he comforted himself and said, "Forget it, no matter what, this time I've expressed my wish. When the time is right, I'll probably be bestowed the title of king." After consoling himself, Yang Qindong began to wait for Kuang Yi to talk to him. Although he could not be bestowed the title of king, he still wanted the benefits. He could not expect him to go to war without paying anything. This wait did not take long. On the second day, Guanyin came. After seeing Tiger's mane, he told him that the minister wanted to meet with the Duke of Loyalty. He also said that he would be waiting for him in the city. Tiger's mane naturally did not agree immediately. He only said that he would report this matter to the young master. As for whether he would go or not, it was not up to him to decide. After Guaning left, Tiger's Mane told Yang Qindong about the matter. The sixth young master laughed heartily. This Kuang Yi is also afraid of death. He actually asked me to meet him in the city. He is afraid that I will flip out. Seeing that even the Minister of War was intimidated by the young master's reputation, Hu Meng naturally had a smile on his face, as if he had something to do with honor. Well, if that is the case, how about we give him face? Not only do we have to go, but we also have to go quickly. We have to act as if we are in a hurry. Only by doing this can we get more benefits. Yang Qindong quickly made a decision. He had to act as if he did not know anything. This way, when he heard the news, he would flip out. No matter what he said or did, others would be able to understand. Yang Qindong wanted to enter the city for negotiations. Tiger's Mane immediately went to arrange it. Although there should not be any danger at this time, the young master's safety was definitely the most important thing in Yangxia. There was no room for carelessness. He immediately gathered a total of 60 people from the first and second guards to be responsible for the young master's close safety. Then he mobilized a company of elites, the Cold Front, to be responsible for the periphery. In addition, he had the Wolf Fang Special Forces and the Ghost Sniper team to secretly cooperate with him. Just like how Kuang Yi was guarding against Yang Qindong, how could they not be on guard against each other? After doing these things, Tiger's Mane reported the situation to Yang Qindong. He just nodded slightly to show that he understood and did not say anything. This was the concern of his subordinates. Of course, he had to accept it. After all, if something really happened to him, then the world would really be in chaos. When Tiger's Mane reported, as the first wife, Hu Yin, was tidying up Yang Qindong's clothes. They had been married for more than a year, and Hu Yin had completed the transformation from a little girl to a qualified wife. Her behavior was more natural and graceful. From a girl in the Hu family to Yang Qindong's wife, Hu Yin did not feel too uncomfortable. Of course, this was because of Yang Qindong's protection, but at the same time, it was also because there were no parents-in-law. Without anyone to control her, she could obtain the greatest power as soon as she came in. When she did things naturally, she did not have to worry too much. It had been smooth sailing, especially after Yang Qindong treated her very well after marriage. This made Hu Yin very satisfied. Even so, she still had a regret in her heart. That was, after such a long time, she was still not pregnant with her husband's flesh and blood. In this era, there were 3 ways to be unfilial, and the worst was to have no descendants. One could imagine how much pressure she was under. If it were not for Yang Qindong repeatedly emphasizing that now was the time of war, and the environment was not conducive to having children, and if it were not for the other 3 wives who were also not pregnant, she was afraid that she would not have been able to resist. Naturally, Hu Yin did not know that the lack of children was partly caused by Yang Qindong. He did his best to take various measures in the bedroom. Of course, it was not that he did not want children, but for the sake of the wives. He remembered reading a book in his later life, which said that the best age for a woman to conceive was between the ages of 22 and 23. At that time, a woman's body was at its best. Now, none of the wives were over 20, so he was not in a hurry. Of course, if they were really pregnant by accident, he would be very happy and attach great importance to it. She carefully helped Yang Qindong put on the iconic set of green clothes and looked around. When she was sure that everything was fine, Hu Yin nodded with satisfaction. Yes, my 6th son is handsome. Ah, don't praise yourself like this. Listening to Hu Yan's sigh, Yang Qindong could not help but be happy. Even if he had a calm heart, it made him very happy to be praised by the person he loved. Seeing that Yang Qindong seemed to be in a good mood, Hu Yin opened her mouth, but did not say anything. Yang Qindong saw her hesitant look. What's wrong? Is there anything that can't be said between us? Since Yang Qindong asked, Hu Yin said with some embarrassment, 6th son, it's like this. We also want to enter the city to have a look. Sister Shui has mentioned this to me twice, but considering that you have been busy, she did not mention it. Today you enter the city and take us in to have a look. Don't worry, we know what to do and will bring guards with us. Besides, with Tai Qingyi and the others, no one will be blind enough to provoke us. It was no wonder that Hu Yin would have such a request. After all, she was a woman who was not even 20 years old. At first, she was excited and curious about staying in the military camp every day, but after a long time, it was inevitable that she would feel bored. Therefore, a while ago, 3rd Madame Shui had asked if she could go to Gaozhou Prefecture. Considering that she did not want to cause trouble for her husband, Hu Yin refused. However, seeing that Yang Qindong was going to enter the city today, she wondered if she should go with him. After all, not only did she want to go, but so did Sister Shui. Even if it was for Sister Shue's sake, she should say this idea. Chapter 444. It's been hard on you. As soon as Hu Yin spoke, Yang Qindong understood the problem and nodded. Then let's go into the city and take a look. Tiger's Mane, tell Tai Qingyi and the others to prepare. Also, assign the first guard to the two madams. It's better not. Captain Tai and the others are enough. The first guard should stay by your side. Hu Yin said with a look of refusal. It's okay. The second guard has been trained long ago. Captain Dao Xiao has complained to me more than once that they have the ability to shoulder the burden alone. Now let's give them a chance. Besides, as long as Kuang Ye's head is not kicked by a donkey, they will definitely not dare to make things difficult for me. Haha. Hearing Yang Qindong's last witty words, Hu Yin covered her mouth and chuckled. She knew that her husband was doing this for her own good and also showing his concern, so she agreed. Okay, then I will tell Sister Shui the good news and make her happy. After Hu Yin finished speaking, she really left the tent. When she left, her face was very happy. Looking at this scene, Yang Qindong could not help but sigh. It was good to be young. Yang Qindong was still very satisfied with the relationship between the madams, but he also knew that it could not be like this forever. Once they were older, their thoughts would be more mature. Once they had children, conflicts of interest would naturally appear. Once he really created something big, it would be a question of who would inherit and how much would be inherited. At that time, it would be impossible for them to be as close as they were now. But after thinking about it, Yang Qindong quickly shook his head. That was still a very distant matter. There was no need to think so much now. It was better to think about the meeting with Kuang Yi first. After receiving the information about Nanjing yesterday, Yang Qindong knew that after being disappointed, he also understood his position in Zhu Qizhen's heart. Others could be crowned king, but he could not. It seemed that Zhu Qizhen was very afraid of him. In other words, he had already formed such an impression in the other party's heart. It would be very difficult or even impossible to change it. Even if he disbanded the mercenaries now, it would only be a temporary peace. It would be impossible for him to live in peace forever. Once they seized the opportunity and created something that could be used against them, it would be the time for the army to be locked up. In the final analysis, Yang Qindong had already seen that Zhu Qizhen would not tolerate him after testing him with the king bestowment request. Since that was the case, there was no need for him to harbor any illusions. He would directly reveal his powerful side. Even if it was to protect himself for the safety of his family and loved ones, he had to have sufficient strength. Of course, even after going through all these, Yang Qindong's strategy still hadn't changed. That was to surround them but not attack. Even though the great Ming dynasty was divided into the north and the south, the majority of the commoners still managed to get by. During the early Ming dynasty, the economy recovered and developed through the Hongwu, Jianghu, and Yongle dynasties. During the Renzong and Xuanzong dynasties, the economy prospered. During the Mingren dynasty, they stopped purchasing and redressed grievances. They paid tribute to the commoners and shared benefits with the commoners. They ordered for the troops to be stopped and for the commoners to be raised. They also stopped the treasure ships from going to the Western Ocean and stopped the royal family from purchasing jewels. These actions eased the social conflicts and allowed the commoners to recover. Productivity was developed, opening up a stable and prosperous era. After Ming Xuanzong ascended the throne, he quickly quelled the Han King Zhu Gaoshu's rebellion and continued the Mingren dynasty's ruling philosophy. He implemented a policy of focusing on agriculture, helping the poor and punishing corruption. He continued to use the three yangs, helping the commoners, helping the poor and punishing corruption. This caused the Ming dynasty to be stable and the economy to develop quickly. During their reign, the government was clear and the laws were strict. The economy developed, the commoners lived in peace and the society was stable. It formed the peaceful scene of the early Ming dynasty. The later generations called it the rule of Renxian, which was comparable to the Zhou dynasty's rule of Qingkang, the Han dynasty's rule of Wenjing, and the Tang dynasty's rule of Jingguan. If it wasn't for Zhu Zhanji passing away in the 10th year of Xuanda, 1435, he would have died at the age of 38. If the rule of Renxian ended like that, even if Yang Qindong came here and brought the large warehouse with him, it would be very difficult for him to achieve anything. Facing the great Ming dynasty, which had a strong economy and military, if Yang Qindong wanted to do something, it would be the same as going against the development of society, and he wouldn't be able to win the hearts of the people. It was because the great Ming dynasty's foundation was too good that even after the defeat of Tu Mu and the chaos in the south, the great Ming dynasty's foundation was still there. Many people were still loyal to the imperial court. Especially in the hearts of the commoners, the great Ming dynasty was still very strong and was worth relying on. Under such an environment, even if Yang Qindong could take down the southern Beiming emperor and rule the imperial court, it was inevitable that the commoners would complain. There would even be many people who would rise up against him. If that was the case, then the Han people would fight amongst themselves. This was definitely not something that Yang Qindong wanted to see. He still wanted to lead them to unify the world. In the future, they would feel extremely proud to be born into a Han family. Just like the Americans in the future, they were arrogant wherever they went. In other countries, if something happened to the Americans, the local government's attention would be completely different. This was the benefit that strength brought to the commoners. Yang Qindong pursued an existence that was higher than the Americans. The place that he wanted to conquer was too big, and he needed countless pure Han people to rule it. Once the consumption in the great Ming dynasty was too great, even if he had the territory, there would be no reliable people to manage it. With this, he couldn't start a civil war in the great Ming dynasty's territory, where the Han people lived for a long time. Thinking of this, Yang Qindong shook his head lightly. He believed that Zhu Qizhen definitely didn't know about his thoughts. Not only him but other people also didn't know. They didn't even dare to think about it. However, it was undeniable that although Zhu Qizhen didn't know what he was thinking, this kind of pressure made him unable to fight back and could only admit defeat. Of course, while helplessly admitting defeat, Yang Qindong also had to actively ask for benefits. As long as it wasn't too excessive, the other party would definitely agree. Since they wanted him to work hard, it would be unreasonable to not give him any benefits. Young master, everything is ready. We can set off. Tiger's Mane once again entered the tent to ask for instructions. Let's go. Yang Qindong agreed and strode out of the tent. Gaozhou City. Although there were nearly 70,000 Miao soldiers stationed not far from the city, order in the city was still carried out in an orderly manner under Kuang Yi and the others' appeasement. This was the advantage of having a capable minister. For example, Kuang Yi, although he was the Minister of War, but in fact, his ability to manage the area was very strong. This kind of all-round talent was also what the emperor liked. If he met a famous monarch, there would be more room for development. Speaking of which, if it wasn't for Kuang Yi being too old and his thinking being too rigid, even Yang Qindong would have wanted to tie him up and send him to Qiqin City to be modified for his own use. Under the city tower of Gaozhou City, the city gate was opened. It was no longer closed like before. However, unlike before when the city gate was opened, the citizens couldn't casually leave the city. There were only a few Ming soldiers guarding here. Along with them were Kuang Yi, Guaning, Ma Wei, Yu Guang and the others. The reason they appeared here was naturally to welcome Yang Qindong. When they saw the army in camouflage from afar, Kuang Yi and the others tidied up their official robes and looked forward with anticipation. This time, although Yang Qindong's wish of being named king did not come true, this did not affect Kuang Ye's view of him. In their hearts, if there was anyone who could resolve the crisis in the southwest of the southern Ming Empire, it would definitely be Yang Qindong. However, the emperor did not agree to being named king. As the Minister of War, Kuang Yi could only obey. While taking advantage of today's opportunity to send the imperial edict, he also hoped to persuade Yang Qindong to focus on the overall situation. Even if the emperor didn't promise him, if he had a good performance, it might not be impossible for him to be crowned as a prince. Of course, even Kuang Yi himself did not have confidence in such a conversation. Even though he was the Minister of War and had the position of Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, a lower rank one official, when he saw the iconic luxurious carriage arrive, he couldn't help but feel nervous. Although Yang Qindong was only 21 years old in Kuang Ye's heart, he was someone of the same generation. This was because this person was too smart. When discussing matters with such a person, it was better to avoid all petty tricks. It was better to be more sincere and perhaps get a good result. The luxurious carriage was getting closer and closer. When it was 300 meters away from Gaozhou City's gate, a company of elites had already rushed forward and took over the city's defense. After discovering that there was no danger, they made a gesture to signal that it was safe. Then, the luxurious carriage continued forward until it arrived in front of Kuang Yi and the others. When Kuang Yi saw how careful Yang Qindong was, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. He knew that this was not because Yang Qindong was afraid that he would set a trap. Yang Qindong just wanted to use this method to tell him that their relationship was not as close as before. Even if he wanted to make a request, he should have some sense of propriety. In the end, the carriage stopped in front of Kuang Yi and the others. Then, the tall Beta Persei stretched out and opened the carriage's curtains. Then Yang Qindong, dressed in green, walked out. Compared to the Yang Qindong he saw a while ago, this time his complexion was much rosier and he seemed to be more energetic. Of course, it was not comparable to when he was at his best. But the more he looked like he had just recovered from a serious illness, the more it could be used as proof that he had indeed been seriously ill before. Chapter 445. Congratulations, Duke Zhongdang's body seems to be much better. Seeing Yang Qindong walk out of the carriage in such a state, Kuang Yi cupped his fist and laughed, wanting to use this opportunity to get closer to him. That's right. It's all thanks to the mercy of the Imperial Secret Service. Otherwise, I'm afraid this duke would be long gone from this world. Yang Qindong didn't laugh. Instead he replied very seriously. As soon as he said this, the faces of Guan Ying and the others on the opposite side changed greatly, becoming extremely red. Yang Qindong was poisoned by the embroidered uniform guard. This was something that the deceased embroidered uniform guard, Wei Guang, had personally admitted. Therefore, even if Yang Qindong's words were like nails, Guan Ying and the others had no right to object. They could only lower their heads and not say a word. Fortunately, Kuang Yi was still there. This good official of several dynasties, his ability to adapt was quite strong. He said with a serious face, "This old man has already reported to the emperor about the embroidered uniform guard's audacity to secretly harm a meritorious official. The embroidered uniform guard has already been punished, and a few of them have been removed from their positions. This can be considered the emperor giving justice to Duke Zhongdang." This matter was not something that Kuang Yi was talking nonsense, it really happened. However, only Zhu Qizhen himself knew whether those who had been removed from their positions had truly lost their power, or if they were just putting on an act. Yang Qindong, who also received the news, heard Kuang Ye's words. His originally serious face had a trace of a smile, then he cupped his fist towards the direction of Nanjing and said, "Then this duke thanks the emperor for his kindness." There was not much respect in his words. If there were other eunuchs present, it would be inevitable for them to scold him. However, in Kuang Ye's eyes, all of this could not be more normal. What? He had suffered a little grievance, and he was not happy to say a few words to vent it. As long as Yang Qindong was happy and was willing to help the southern Ming Empire, which was in dire straits, it didn't matter how harsh the words were. Furthermore, Yang Qindong hadn't even said anything. He was just being a little disrespectful. Speaking of which, the word respect should be kept in one's heart and not spoken out loud. Who did not know how to say nice words? Would words like that really count? Kuang Yi had his own judgment, so at this moment he did not show anything. Instead, he generously made a gesture to the people behind him. Yang Qindong did not stand on ceremony and walked side by side with Kuang Yi. The two of them chatted and laughed as they walked towards the capital of Gaozhou. Naturally, there were hundreds of elites of Lung Feng following behind him. This time, for the sake of safety, Tiger's Mane allowed each of them to bring 2 basic sets of ammunition, which was 400 rounds per person. In addition, there were 5,000 to 6,000 rounds of ammunition in total. With such strength, even if the southern Ming army in the city wanted to do something bad, they would not be able to get any benefits. Not to mention Yang Qindong had a large warehouse in his hands. How many rounds of ammunition and advanced weapons could he not take out? They entered the city, followed by Hu Yan and Lady Shui in the luxurious carriage. Tai Qingyi, the captain of the guards, led 20 female soldiers and the first guard, Qiu V's team of 30 people, a total of 50 guards into the city. With such a team, as long as they did not encounter a large-scale enemy, there would not be any safety issues. Once something happened, as long as they could hold on for a short while, reinforcements would arrive immediately, and their safety would be guaranteed. As women, they naturally liked rouge and face powder very much. As Yang Qindong's wives, they already had all kinds of new cosmetics that could not be seen outside, provided by the cosmetics factory in Chen City. However, since they were used to shopping in rouge shops since they were young, since they entered the city, it was necessary for them to make a trip there. It was just like how many people were used to eating big fish and big meat, so it was not bad to have a few light side dishes occasionally. Gaozhou Prefecture had experienced the chaos of the Huang bandits and was now surrounded by the Miao army. It was impossible to say that the business was not affected at all. Just like the current Gaozhou Prefecture city, because it was too troublesome to transport things in from the outside world, it caused the prices of goods in the city to skyrocket. Even businesses like rouge shops that weren't absolutely necessary were greatly affected. The prices were more than 4 to 5 times higher than normal, causing many young ladies and madams in the city to be unable to patronize them. However, this was not a problem for Hu Yan and Lady Shui. Along the way, Yang Qindong had instructed Lung Feng to take anything that didn't belong to anyone. He wasn't courteous at all. Although Zhu Qizhen did not give them a single coin for military expenses, just by eliminating the Huang bandits, they had already robbed a lot of spoils of war. For example, when Gao Xiong left with the navy last time, just the gold and silver alone was more than 15 million taels, and this did not include the house deeds, land deeds, and some antiques and paintings. It was impossible for them to take all the money away. Yang Qindong had a lot of gold and silver with him. As a madam, it was not a problem for him to be generous. That was why Hu Yan and Madame Shui dared to step into the store. After the two madams entered the rouge shop, Xiao Vi and 30 guards completely controlled the entire street outside the shop to ensure that no one came to disturb the two madams. Not only the front door of the rouge shop was guarded, but the back door was also guarded. Badao Jiang and Ping Yu of the first guard team were arranged to guard here. Although they were not protecting the sixth young master this time, the two madams' identities were equally important. Badao Jiang and Peng Yu did not have the slightest intention of relaxing. When they arrived at the back door of the rouge shop, they saw a black shadow seem to have floated in. The reason why they said that the shadow had floated in was because the person was so fast that Peng Yu did not see it clearly. He did not even know if it was an illusion in front of his eyes. What kind of person was Peng Yu? He grew up in the mountains and dealt with all kinds of wild beasts. After many years of hunting, he was very sensitive to danger. Brother Ba, did you see a shadow enter the backyard just now? Peng Yu was not sure if he saw a person or not, so he cautiously asked Badao Jiang, who was in charge of guarding the back door with him. Badao Jiang was good at endurance, especially when it came to fist techniques. However, when it came to eyesight, he was still not good enough. In response to Peng Yu's question, he asked in confusion, "Why do you say that? Did you see anything?" After these days of contact, they understood each other very well and knew where Peng Yu's advantages were. After saying that, Badao Jiang's expression changed. "Brother Peng, are you going to say that you saw someone enter the shop from the back door?" It was a little blurry. "I didn't see it clearly," Peng Yu, who was asked, answered in an uncertain tone. "You didn't see it clearly? Does that mean someone went in?" Badao Jiang was a straightforward person. Thinking of his responsibility, he immediately turned around and rushed into the back door after saying that. "Brother Ba? I'm not sure if it's the same person." Peng Yu saw Badao Jiang's eagerness and could not help but shout anxiously. What he saw was Badao Jiang's back and his voice coming from afar. "Mistress's safety is more important than anything. It's not wrong to go in and have a look whether or not someone is there." After shouting these words, Badao Jiang's figure was getting farther and farther away. Peng Yu did not think about anything else. He put the 9-5 style behind him and strode after him. After Hu Yan and Madame Shui entered, the rouge shop quickly became lively, especially when Tai Qingyi entered with 20 valiant female soldiers in camouflage uniforms. Seeing this, the proprietress of the shop came out to welcome them. Most of the people who ran the rouge shop were women. Otherwise, it would be inconvenient to communicate with them. The proprietress of the shop was a woman in her 40s. Looking at her complexion, one could tell that she must have been beautiful when she was young. "Oh, our esteemed guest has arrived. Apologies for not going out to meet you. Take a good look. Our Lu's Rouge shop is an old brand. It's one of the best in the entire Gaozhou prefecture." The lady boss had a smile on her face as she spoke as if they were close friends. Hu Yan and Lady Shui were used to big occasions, so they didn't have any stage fright. They smiled and went to the counter under the guidance of the landlady. Then they looked at the colorful makeup products. Tai Qingyi followed the two matriarchs closely and looked around from time to time. However, just as he took 2 steps forward, he heard a female soldier reprimanding him. "Who are you? Get out." Just this shout alone attracted at least 3 nearby female soldiers to come over. Even though they were all women, they had all undergone strict training in Crimson City. The one who trained with them was the most elite, Lung Feng. Therefore their skills were not any weaker than Lung Feng's. It was just that their strength was lacking. Under the shout, an unprepossessing man had already pulled out a sharp dagger from his waist and rushed in the direction of the counter. The man's speed was very fast and his strength was even greater. Just by getting close to her, he had already pushed the female soldier who had first noticed him and called out to him to the side. When the flying figure landed, it directly smashed a wooden chair that was meant for guests to rest on into smithereens. However, what the man did not expect was that after he pushed one person away, another woman rushed in from the front, left, and right. Instantly, the situation became 1 against 3. "Women? Why are there so many women?" He spoke awkwardly in the Central Plains language. Then he raised his knife and slashed at the 3 women in front of him. All of this happened too quickly. The three female soldiers were caught off guard. The saber slashed the arm of one of the female soldiers, causing a stream of blood to spurt out. Chapter 446. With one successful move, the man flew up and kicked at the other female soldier. He thought it would be easy for him to hurt another person with this quick kick. However, he didn't expect that the person in front of him would move. His kick missed, and because he used too much strength, he almost fell to the ground. Taking advantage of his movement, the three female soldiers, together with the female soldier whose arm was injured, surrounded him again. It seemed that they would never let him take a step forward. At such a close distance, it was not a wise move to fire a gun. It was easy to hurt their companions. So the three women used their fists and feet. They cooperated with each other and surrounded the man in the middle. Their fists and feet were like raindrops as they smashed towards the center. At this moment, another 4 female soldiers rushed in from the side, as if they were going to help the 3 women. The other 13 female soldiers and Captain Tai Qingyi surrounded Hu Yan and Madame Shui tightly to protect them. The fight in the store soon attracted the attention of Captain Chiu Vi, who was guarding the front door. At this moment he had already rushed in through the front door with 4 sturdy guards and stepped into the Rouge store. The timely appearance of Chiu Vi and the others made the man, who had been punched and kicked countless times, lose all hope of assassinating them. He had thought that the success rate of killing 2 women would be very high. However, it seemed that he had underestimated them. Since that was the case, he decided to run away. Where there was life, there was hope. Once the man had made up his mind, he decisively swung the dagger in front of him and threw it toward the counter. This alerted the enemy and caused the 7 female guards surrounding him to rush toward the counter. They would not forget that there were 2 matriarchs there. The dagger flew through the air like an arrow. However, just as it was about to reach the counter, Tai Qingyi jumped up and grabbed it in midair. His voice was heard before his body landed on the ground. "Go after him. Don't let him escape." Only then did the 7 female soldiers stop and turn around, wanting to give chase. However, after 2 breaths of time, the man was nowhere to be seen. Just when they thought that the assassin would definitely run far away, with a muffled bang, a figure flew back from the side door. After taking a closer look, who else could it be if it wasn't the assassin just now? After landing on the ground, the killer looked pained. Obviously, he was beaten back, and the person who hit him was so strong that he lost his strength for a moment. As soon as he landed on the ground, he wanted to stand up and fight, but 2 steel blades flashing with white light were already placed on his neck. Then, a sharp pain suddenly came from the bend of his calf, accompanied by a very light crack sound. The person who kicked him was Chiu Vi, the captain of the first guard. Needless to say, his entire left calf was crippled by this kick. Chou Wu led his men to restrain the assassin. It was at this moment that Badao Jiang and Peng Yu appeared from the side door. Clearly, it was because of their timely arrival that the assassin was forced to retreat and heavily injured to the ground. Seeing that Ba Dao River's Peng Yu had also come out, Captain Chou Wu nodded his head approvingly. Clearly he was very satisfied with their performance. Then he looked around with a serious expression and said, "It's dangerous here. Let's get out of the city first and send a signal to the outside." After Chiu Vi said that, Tai Qingyi led a group of female guards to cover Hu Yan and Madame Shui and walked out of the Rouge shop. The landlady and the 3 waitresses in the shop were also carried out by the other guards. 2 guards escorted the killer, who had lost the ability to move his left leg, out of the Rouge shop. However, just as the other guards were approaching them, suddenly, an arrow pierced through the air. Out of instinct, Chiu Vi shouted, "Protect the madam." Then he led the others toward Hu Yan and Madame Shui. As it turned out, it was a false alarm. The arrow was not aimed at anyone else but at the assassin. Because he was not prepared, the arrow hit him in the chest. In just a breath, the wounded killer died with black blood flowing out of his 7 orifices. The arrow is poisonous. Be careful, everyone. After Chou Wu stepped forward to take a look, his pupils suddenly shrank. Then he shouted to the people around him. While protecting the 2 matriarchs, he pulled out a small pistol in his right hand and suddenly fired at the sky. The government office of Gaozhou Prefecture. This was where Kuang Yi was staying, as well as the place where he and Yang Qindong were discussing matters. When they arrived, Kuang Yi smiled and invited Yang Qindong into a small study room. They closed the door and cut off all contact with the outside world. There were no outsiders in the room. Kuang Yi's smile disappeared and was replaced by a look of guilt. He cupped his fist and said to Yang Qindong, "Duke Zhongwei, I am so incompetent. The emperor has sent a decree, but he did not immediately agree to confer you the title of king. Lord Kuang, what is the meaning of this?" Please don't be like this. This duke is unable to accept it. Kuang Yi was so respectful towards Wuxia. Most likely he was only respectful towards Zong. Yang Qindong, who had just sat down, quickly stood up and held Kuang Ye's arm. Kuang Yi let out a long sigh and said, "Loyal duke, this old man has let you down." "Don't say that. This is the emperor's will and has nothing to do with you. But what's going on? Can you tell me clearly?" Yang Qindong let out a long sigh, pretending that it was the first time he had received the news. This. Kuang Yi first revealed a troubled expression, then stomped his foot and said, "Forget it, there are some things that cannot be avoided even if you want to. This old man will explain it to the loyal duke." Kuang Yi seemed to have gathered a lot of courage and told Zong about the emperor's decree. Especially when he talked about how important the title of king was and how he had to inform Ming and get their approval, his tone became even more serious. The reason why Kuang Yi did this was to give Yang Qindong hope. A person can only do things well when there is hope in their eyes. If he really couldn't see any future, who knew what unimaginable things he would do? Now that Kuang Yi said this, how could Yang Qindong not understand what he meant? With regards to such words of comfort, not to mention himself, even the other party probably wouldn't believe it. He couldn't help but bitterly smile. "Minister Kuang, I am calling you Uncle Kuang. Do you believe what you just said?" Kuang Yi, who was still lowering his head and playing the pity card, suddenly heard Yang Qindong call him uncle. He felt that something was wrong. Then he heard Yang Qindong say, "Do you believe it yourself?" His face turned red and he didn't know what to say. Seeing that Kuang Yi was speechless, Yang Qindong's expression turned gloomy. He continued, "After defeating the Huang bandit army, all the generals were promoted and received benefits. May I ask if this has anything to do with me?" This. Kuang Ye's expression became even more unnatural. In this matter, Zong was indeed in the wrong. Seeing that Kuang Yi did not respond, Yang Qindong continued, "With the empty position of an imperial envoy, I will let it go. If you don't give me a single grain of military pay, I will not quibble. Even if you don't give me any rewards, I can endure it. However, after defeating the Huang bandit army and delivering Huang Yuliang's head, not only did the emperor remove me from my position as imperial envoy, he also ordered the mercenaries to leave immediately and sent a large army to watch over us. May I ask, even if you want to burn the bridge after crossing the river, isn't this action too fast? If Minister Kuang was in my position, how would he explain this to my brother, the leader of the mercenaries? Ask me." Each question was like a bolt of lightning that smashed into Kuang Ye's heart like a hammer. He was speechless and his face turned red. Sigh. Yang Qindong didn't point at Kuang Yi to answer his questions. Even if Zhu Qizhen was here, he would probably keep his mouth shut. After using up the mercenaries, they found that the king of Min's faction in Yunnan was very powerful. They asked us to work for them, but we didn't get any benefits. Even if I could figure it out, how could I explain it to the mercenaries? Would they be able to think it through? Don't say any more. Kuang Yi finally spoke. Then he slowly raised his head and looked at Yang Qindong with a pair of expectant eyes. The emperor has wronged you. But no matter what, the southern Ming Empire is weak now. Please help us. Thinking about it, Master Yang has assisted several generations of Ming emperors. You have wholeheartedly served the country and the emperor. Kuang Yi wanted to play the emotional card. However, he thought his method was correct. He didn't know that when he mentioned this, Yang Qindong became even angrier. Are you talking about my father? If others don't know, may I ask Minister Kuang, why did my father retire and return to his hometown? Why did he die on the way back? He racked his brains for decades for the great Ming, but he didn't even want to return home to retire. If he was in heaven, he probably wouldn't think it was worth it. After Yang Qindong finished speaking, Kuang Ye's eyes flashed. He didn't expect that Yang Qindong was still defending his father. If this was the case, then the problem was serious. As one of the three Yangs, Yang Rong assisted several emperors of the great Ming and was finally appointed as Master Yang. It could be said that he was a high-ranking official. However, with the rise of the eunuchs, especially the suppression of Wang Jin's faction, he died on the way back. How could there not be a reason for his disappointment? Chapter 447. Because of this matter, Kuang Yi felt that it was unfair, but he only thought about it in his heart. After all, even if it was him, if he offended Wang Jin, he would not have a good ending. However, so many years had passed after all. He originally thought that Yang Qindong would have forgotten about it, but now it seemed that he was still a son. How could he dare to forget about his father's matter? In that case, Could it be that this person's resentment towards the great Ming dynasty ran so deep? If that was the case, then things would be difficult to handle. Some thoughts, once born, would be like demons haunting one's body. It was difficult to get rid of them. Kuang Ye's expression changed again and again. He was still trying to analyze what Yang Qindong wanted to do. But at this moment, the sixth young master Yang spoke again. Forget it, that was a long time ago. Let's not talk about it. But Minister Kuang, do you think I will repeat my father's old path? Yang Qindong's face was very serious, which made Kuang Ye's heart tremble. Old path? Could it be that when one was old, one would be ostracized, oppressed, or even leave helplessly and die in a foreign land? This was probably an outcome that no one wanted to see. Thinking about it carefully, although Zhu Qizhen did not persecute Yang Rong with Wang Zhen, he really did not help much. He only carried out the slogan of not being punished. It was like this in the past. Now that Yang Qindong had become so powerful and feared, how would he be treated when he lost his power? It was no wonder that Yang Qindong wanted to be conferred the title of king. After all, if he really became a king with a different surname, it meant that he would have more protection. For example, he could build a king's residence according to the rules and even have his own guards. Perhaps this way he would be safer. Every man for himself, and the heavens take the hindmost. Yang Qindong thought about the future when he was powerful. This was called scheming and astute, which was very normal. But facing such a question, Kuang Yi did not know how to answer. Fortunately, Yang Qindong didn't want him to answer, he just asked a question. Through this matter, he wanted to tell Kuang Yi why he wanted to be king. It wasn't because he was ambitious, but because he wanted to find a guarantee. All right, Minister Qi, let's not talk about these issues. Since His Majesty has begun to seriously consider it and has contacted His Majesty by Ming, what's wrong with me waiting for news? But it doesn't seem to be enough to make the mercenaries work hard. Of course, Kuang Yi knew that this so-called serious consideration was nothing more than a pretense to give an answer to Yang Qindong's request. But in fact, it was impossible for this matter to pass. No matter if it was Ing Zong or Dai Zong, they wouldn't want to see the rise of a king with a different surname. He believed that Yang Qindong must be able to see through this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have achieved so much in such a short period of time. The reason why he said this was just because he saw through it and didn't say it out loud. This was a smart person. As for the next mention that it wasn't enough, Kuang Yi knew that the other party was a little moved, or he wanted to continue to make more contributions and save more capital. He also answered this sentence very happily, of course it isn't just these. If Minister Qi has any request, you can put forward it. As long as it is within this old man's ability, I will definitely speak to His Majesty. Well then, let's see the sincerity first. As far as I know, Songjiang Prefecture. In history there is a saying, first Songjiang Prefecture then Shanghai Bund. Songjiang Prefecture is the predecessor of Shanghai, originally had a shipyard but it is now idle. There are many ships that have been in the water, as well as those that have not been in the water yet. There are also many iron ore and steel there. Now there is not much use for them to be placed there. It just so happens that the mercenaries need these. I have also received news from the mercenary leader that they want to get these things. This should not be a problem. The Ming dynasty banned the sea. Regarding this policy, although after Zhu Qizhen went to Nanjing and became the emperor of the southern Ming dynasty, there was already news that he wanted to remove this restriction. After all, there were still many opportunities at sea. Especially in the past, the great Ming dynasty's navigation industry was very developed. Once it was opened, it would bring a lot of benefits to the southern Ming dynasty. If it weren't for the sudden outbreak of war in the south, the problem would have been solved by now. The timing of Yang Qindong's suggestion was extremely accurate, which also made it impossible for Kuang Yi to refuse. What's wrong? You didn't agree to his request before and used all kinds of reasons to delay it. Now that he said that he wants something that you don't want, you still have the nerve to refuse? If this is also fine, then don't ask him for help if you have any problems in the future. Mutual assistance was the key. It was the key to sustainable development. Only giving without any return, this kind of relationship wouldn't last long. Kuang Yi only thought about it in his mind and nodded. I can't give an answer now, but it shouldn't be a big problem. In short, this old man will do his best. That's good. Let's wait for this matter to be done. After the mercenaries can pull the steel from Songjiang Prefecture, then let's talk about how to deal with the current situation. When Yang Qindong heard Kuang Ye's words, he knew that the matter was mostly done. He relaxed his body and leaned back on the wooden chair behind him. That's natural. It's just that the current situation seems to be extremely unfavorable to us. If it's possible, if the mercenaries take action a day earlier, I'm afraid that we can save many people from the abyss of suffering. Kuang Yi thought about whether he could persuade Yang Qindong to take action first. At least, he could stand out and attract attention and relieve the pressure of the southern Ming dynasty's army. It was just that Yang Qindong saw through such a scheme at a glance. Minister Kuei, the mercenaries don't belong to me. Ah, that's right, that's right. Then I will immediately report the situation here to the emperor. If it's urgent, it shouldn't take long for the news to come back. Kuang Yi was reminded that this matter was brought up by the leader of the mercenaries. If it wasn't resolved, would the mercenaries take action easily? Even if it was Yang Qindong, he would not have the strength to do so. Of course, Kuang Yi wouldn't think that the real leader of the mercenaries was Yang Qindong. Firstly, the other party was too young. Whether it was Ming or the southern Ming dynasty, they had investigated his past and didn't find anything strange about him. Secondly, the mercenaries were too powerful, especially when they had extremely advanced firearms in their hands. How could such things be created by a young man? Although it was ridiculous to say that saving a life could command the mercenaries, no smart person would believe it. Most likely, someone wanted to borrow Yang Qindong's hand to make the mercenaries famous. But in the end, putting the young master of the Yang family in the position of the leader of the mercenaries was also unbelievable. No one would believe that the title of the leader of the mercenaries was real and had the greatest deterrence. Now that he wanted something in the name of this person, how could Kuang Yi dare to be careless and bargain? He had already decided in his heart that after Yang Qindong left, he would immediately write a secret letter to the emperor. Moreover, he had to go quickly and show the leader of the mercenaries that they were very efficient. This would definitely be beneficial for future cooperation. After everything was done, if he could send people to the mercenaries' headquarters to learn and even buy the advanced firearms in the mercenaries' hands, he wouldn't have to worry about the great Ming dynasty not being unified. He wouldn't have to worry about the provocation and harassment of the surrounding small countries. While Kuang Yi was still thinking about these things and even making plans for a beautiful future, he suddenly heard the faint sound of a gunshot. Then a dazzling beam of light shot up into the sky. Even during the day he could still vaguely see the dazzling scene of flying into the sky. The signal flare that Qiu Vi shot was not a crude thing made by the newly developed ordnance stone in Chichen City, nor was it a rudimentary toy made during the Republic of China or the war. It was a product made during the heyday of the military after the founding of the People's Republic of China. It represented the high-tech products of the 21st century. The quality of the signal flare was also very powerful. Once it was shot out, it was impossible for the nearby people not to see it. It was precisely because of its power that when it flew into the sky, not only did the cold vanguard army who had been on guard outside the city see it, even Yang Qindong, who was discussing matters in the city, saw it immediately. Bang! Just as the signal flare rose into the sky, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Then the door was kicked open from the outside. Tiger Man and Beta Persei each carried a pitch-black Type 95 pistol and rushed into the room. "Young master, are you okay? Our brothers are dealing with the people outside." Tiger Man first looked carefully at Yang Qindong as soon as he came in. When he found that the young master was fine, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. Then he stood in front of Yang Qindong as if he wanted to hurt the young master and kill him first. Beta Persei was even more direct. He strode forward, grabbed Kuang Ye's collar and lifted him up. When his feet were in the air and he felt that it was difficult to breathe, Kuang Yi, whose face was flushed, shouted in dissatisfaction, "What are you doing? Put me down, put me down." No matter what, he was still the dignified Minister of War. Now that he had the title of Grand Tutor of the Crown Prince, he was a well-known lower first-rank official. Even in the entire southern Ming dynasty, he was one of the most powerful people. Now that he was lifted up by someone, it was a psychological blow, not to mention how he felt. Put Minister Qing down first. Yang Qindong had already thought of many things in this short period of time. Since the signal flare rose into the sky, it couldn't be unintentional. Something urgent must have happened. However, it didn't seem likely that it was related to Kuang Yi. If that was the case, why didn't he see any executioners in this room? As long as an old man like Kuang Yi was here with him, even if he had just been cured of the poison, he wouldn't be a weak person. Was Kuang Yi that bold? Chapter 448. Yang Qindong didn't believe that Kuang Yi had anything to do with this. At the very least, he shouldn't have been involved. That was why he asked Beta Persei to put Kuang Yi down. With Yang Qindong's order, Beta Persei reluctantly put Kuang Yi down. Kuang Yi coughed violently after he was released. Speaking of which, Yang Er's strength was really great. That grab just now didn't have the slightest intention of being lenient. If he hadn't let go in time, it was likely that he would have suffocated to death in just a moment. After a series of violent coughs, Kuang Yi, whose face was still a little red, asked angrily, "What are you trying to do?" Kuang Yi only shouted angrily. He didn't ask too much because he realized that something was wrong. If Yang Qindong really wanted to harm him, he could have done it the moment he entered the room. Why did he have to talk for so long, to the point that the matter was basically settled before he acted? He felt that there must be some kind of misunderstanding. "What are we trying to do? Let's see what your men do first," Yang Qindong retorted. Although he respected Kuang Yi and some of the things he did when it came to matters of life and death, he wouldn't hesitate to kill. "My subordinates?" Kuang Yi fell silent after saying this. Naturally, he didn't have the slightest ill will towards Yang Qindong. Especially when he still needed to ask for help, he wouldn't have any other thoughts. However, he couldn't control what his men wanted to do. If someone disobeyed him and wanted to do something, he couldn't guarantee that he wouldn't be able to do it. At least before he figured out what was going on, he didn't dare to make any promises. Kuang Yi didn't say anything, so Yang Qindong didn't ask. Instead, he calmly sat back in his chair and looked outside. He believed that since there was a chance to send a signal, it shouldn't be too urgent. He just had to wait for the news. As long as he was fine, the Yang family army wouldn't be in a mess and there wouldn't be any big trouble. Yang Qindong quickly sat down with a calm look on his face. This gave Tiger's mane and Beta Persei a backbone, and they were no longer as flustered as before. Although Kuang Yi didn't sit down, he had temporarily regained his freedom. When he saw this scene, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Not to mention other things, just this calmness alone was something that no young man could do. While they were waiting, the outside gradually quieted down. From the beginning to the end, not a single Ming soldier or general rushed over. From this point on, Kuang Yi sighed in his heart. How could he not? With his experience, he could guess that his subordinates had been subdued. Or else, why would no one care about him, the powerful minister of the Ministry of War? Report. In less than a cup of tea's time, someone finally appeared outside the room in the inner courtyard. This person was no stranger to Yang Qindong. It was Ba Daojiang, who had joined the first guard squad not long ago. "What's the matter? Speak." As soon as he saw Ba Daojiang, Yang Qindong frowned. He knew that the first guard squad was assigned to protect his two wives today. Could it be that something had happened to them? Unconsciously, Yang Qindong's right fist suddenly clenched. He swore that no matter who it was, if anyone dared to have ideas about his wives or hurt them, even if it was related to the Southern Ming Emperor, he would never forgive them. Even if he was still not strong enough, even if he had limited military strength, insufficient population, and some of the foundations were not well established, he would still go crazy. Yang Qindong had the existence of a large warehouse. If he was forced into a corner, he would show everyone what a real cannon was, what a human meat grinder tank was, and what a high-altitude plane was. Yang Qindong's anger was conveyed through his tone. Ba Daojiang, who was half kneeling on the ground, felt a chill run down his spine. Recently, he was fortunate enough to become a member of the first guard squad and had more opportunities to interact with the sixth young master. It was because of this that this person who was younger than him always gave him the impression that he was very kind. It was hard for him to get angry, and even if the sky fell, he would not change his expression. However, now that he was so angry, it was as if he was a completely different person. Ba Daojiang's mind could not help but be in a mess. However, after all, he had been in the Jianghu for so many years, so he still had the basic skills to calm himself down. More importantly, he was now one of the sixth young master's men, and he was the kind that was fully trusted. With that in mind, Ba Daojiang tried his best to remain calm. Then he recounted what happened in and outside Lu Shi's rouge shop. Assassination. Fortunately, they were fine. After hearing this, Yang Qindong heaved a sigh of relief. However, his tone was still strict. "Are the two madams safe now? Has the army entered the city?" Replying to the sixth young master, "The madams are very safe. They are under several layers of protection and will not be in any danger. 1st Battalion Commander Wuxia has already led the army into the city and is taking over the city's defense." Ba Daojiang reported what he saw along the way as well as what Captain Chiu Vi had told him. Unexpectedly, just as he said this, Kuang Yi suddenly spoke. "That's impossible. I didn't hear any killing. The city's defense is also so tight. How did your army enter the city?" Kuang Yi naturally did not believe it. This time, he had been very careful when he summoned Yang Qindong for a meeting. The generals below were also afraid that Yang Qindong would flip out, so they had arranged everything beforehand. After Yang Qindong and the others entered the city, they had tightened the defense. General Yu Guang was personally standing on the city wall to prevent any accidents from happening. There were also hundreds of Ming dynasty soldiers with him. They were already prepared and had a large number of people. How could they be taken down so easily? The key was that there was no sound of movement. This was something unimaginable. Kuang Yi did not believe it. Yang Qindong was unwavering. Since Ba Daojiang dared to say this, he must have seen something with his own eyes. As for whether or not they could complete this mission, he was not worried at all. During this period of time, the Lung Feng soldiers did not have any specific training. Their goal and mission was to quickly attack the city. When the chains and climbing ropes were taken out, the Gaozhou prefecture, which was not very sturdy to begin with, was not much different from their own backyard. Yang Qindong knew why the Lung Feng soldiers were called elites and how powerful they were. He did not doubt the report. His anxious heart finally relaxed, and his expression returned to its original natural state. "All right, you've worked hard. Let's wait here together." "Yes." Ba Daojiang replied respectfully. He took out the black 9-5 style from his back and stared at the door. He looked like a door god who could stop 10,000 men from entering the door. It was an awe-inspiring sight. No one answered him from the beginning to the end. Kuang Yi, who was bored, finally sat down obediently. However, there was a hint of worry in his expression. He could tell that the scout who came to report would not lie. If that was the case, wouldn't his soldiers be too useless? This time, they waited for a little longer, but in less than an hour, the footsteps outside began to become more frequent. Then a few officers in camouflage uniforms with pistols on their belts walked in. The leader was the commander of the 2nd Lung Feng Regiment, Luo Pa. Behind him was the commander of the 1st Battalion, Wuxia. Because Kuang Yi was there, Luo Pa did not bow. He only gave a standard military salute and said, "Commander, everything outside is under control. The 4 gates in the city are also locked down. We are searching for the assassin's accomplices. There is no news yet. Let's go out and take a look." Yang Qindong nodded slightly to show that he understood. He then said to Kuang Yi, who was still in shock, "Minister Cheng, shall we go and take a look?" Although this was a negotiating tone, Kuang Yi knew that if he didn't go, he was afraid that he would be forced into a fight. Moreover, he really wanted to know who wanted to assassinate Yang Qindong's wife and bring him such trouble. "Let's go and take a look. If the assassin is my subordinate, I will definitely give the Duke of Loyalty a satisfactory answer." Kuang Ye's words were very smooth. It was obvious that he had made up his mind. If the person who did this was really his subordinate who made the decision without permission, then he really didn't mind killing a few people to satisfy his appetite. Yang Qindong wanted Kuang Ye's attitude. Just like how Kuang Yi could not fall out with him, he did not want to fall out with Kuang Yi either. Following Yang Qindong, Kuang Yi and the others walked out of the room. When they arrived at the outer courtyard, they saw Guanyin, Ma Wei, and the others with bruises all over their faces. They were tied up like dumplings and pressed to the ground. Judging from their clothes, they were covered in dust, and Guanying's lapel was in tatters. They must have gone through an intense resistance. It was just that they were helpless. They were not as strong as others and would eventually be trampled under their feet. When Kuang Yi walked out, Guanying and the others who were still struggling to turn their heads instantly became obedient. This was too shameful. This was especially true for Guanying. The last time he fought with Yang Er, he was beaten quite badly. However, he thought that it was just a special case. If he encountered ordinary mercenaries with his skills, it would be easy for him to fight against 3 or 4 of them. But just now he was only facing a mercenary. He was still suppressed and beaten until he was pressed to the ground and could not move. Both of them were alone, yet he had easily dealt with him. It was no wonder that he felt ashamed to face anyone. Of course, if he knew that his opponent's name was Dao Xiao, he would not be so depressed. He was the captain of the 2nd Guard team. For Yang Qindong to be able to make them responsible for his safety, one could only imagine how strong they were. Although Guanying was powerful, the intensity and method of training were completely different from the mercenaries. It was normal for him to be defeated. Chapter 449. This was also thanks to Yang Qindong telling all his subordinates before entering the city that they should not fire unless absolutely necessary. After all, the southern Ming Empire was still their ally, and even their superior. If not for this order, Guanying and Ma Wei would not be standing here alive after being hit by the flying bullets just now. Oh no. They were kneeling here. Seeing the subordinates he was so proud of being pressed to the ground, Kuang Ye's expression became very ugly. However, at this moment he wasn't in a position to criticize them. He only walked in front of them and asked in a very strict tone, "Who sent people to assassinate the Duke of Loyalty's wife? Stand up now and I'll give you a quick death. If you don't speak and I find out, I can guarantee that your 3 clans won't have a good life." Even the 3 clans were involved. It could be seen that Kuang Yi was truly angry. However, no matter what he said, Guan Ying and Ma Wei had a confused expression. It was obvious that this was the first time they heard of this matter. Don't pretend to be innocent. If this old man finds out, don't think about living. Kuang Yi coldly threw down these words, but his heart relaxed. From his observation, these 2 generals shouldn't know about this. If that was the case, then perhaps the assassin really wasn't sent by his subordinates. Yang Qindong was also seriously looking at all of this. He almost reached the same conclusion as Kuang Yi. Some things could be deceived with words but not with the eyes. Of course, there were some people who were very good at acting. However, since they didn't admit it, then he would first go and see who the assassin was. As long as he could figure out this person's identity, he would be able to find some clues. The group of people walked out of the gate and went straight to the Lu Rouge shop. Along the way they could see a Lung Feng brother standing guard not far away. This was enough to prove that the entire Gaozhou prefecture had been taken over by the mercenaries. Kuang Yi knew that everything Ba Daojiang said was true. At this moment his expression was very ugly. Gaozhou prefecture wasn't very big, and Lu Shi's Rouge station wasn't far from the Yamen. It didn't take long for the group to arrive. As soon as Yang Qindong appeared, Hu Yan and Madame Shui, who were protected by several layers of people, rushed out and ran to Yang Qindong. "Darling, we're fine. It's just that what happened just now was really scary." It's okay. It's all over now." Yang Qindong hugged and comforted the 2 ladies. Then he said to Captain Tai Qingyi, who was slowly following behind him, "Send the 2 ladies into the carriage first." Female guards had already come forward to escort Hu Yin and the others to the car. On the other side, the first guard captain, Qiu Vi, who was in charge of things here, also walked up to Yang Qindong and reported in a low voice, "Young master, the Phantom Sniper team has taken control of this place. It's very safe here and there are no blind spots. The Wolf Fang Special Forces have already chased after the other killer. With the city gate closed, no one can escape." "Okay." Yang Qindong nodded slightly, indicating that he knew everything. Then he asked, "Where's the killer?" "He's here." Qiu Vi turned around and led Yang Qindong and the others forward. Then he added, "The killer's identity has been confirmed by people who know him in the city. His name is Mo Tuo. Judging from his figure and underwear, he shouldn't be a Han or Miao person. He seems to be a Jiaoji person." "Jiaoji?" Hearing this inference, Yang Qindong's face flashed with doubt for a moment. "Yes, people from the security bureau just came over. Judging from his underwear habits, he should be a Jiaoji person without a doubt." Qiu Vi didn't just say it casually. This was the conclusion given by the security bureau personnel who were familiar with the situation of all parties. "Okay." Yang Qindong nodded again. Countless question marks and possible scenarios flashed through his mind. Kuang Yi and the others who were following behind them heard the word Jiaoji and couldn't hear anything else. Even so, Kuang Yi still strode over. Other than Ba Daojiang, who was following closely behind him to prevent any accidents, the rest of Lung Feng didn't move at all. An old man in his 60s was nothing in their eyes, even if this old man was the Minister of War. Kuang Yi strode forward and tore open Mo Tuo's coat. When he saw the clothes inside, his eyes focused and he shouted, "Yes, he should be a Jiaoji person. This kind of loose collar is their specialty. I've seen it before when I dealt with them." The climate in Jiaoji was warm all year round, so the collar of their underwear was extremely loose. Unlike the Ming army, although the climate in the south was also hot, the collar of their underwear was still very tight due to military regulations. Yang Qindong could understand Kuang Ye's shouting and completely forsaking his bearing as the Minister of War. This was equivalent to eliminating him as a suspect. In fact, Kuang Yi had no motive to harm Yang Qindong at this moment. He wanted to borrow the strength of others, but he couldn't. Why would he try to kill him? Judging from this point alone, Kuang Ye's suspicions were greatly reduced. However, Yang Qindong wouldn't say it out loud. He wanted to make Kuang Yi hesitate. After all, this territory was under the jurisdiction of the Southern Ming Empire. If something happened here, it wasn't wrong to look for the Southern Ming Empire. After Kuang Yi shouted for a while, he realized that no one agreed with him and could only give up. However, looking at his complexion, it was much better than before. He must have known the truth and was now relaxed. The atmosphere at the scene became much quieter. Tiger's man had already found a chair for Yang Qindong to sit down. Then Chiovi reported what happened in detail. The sixth young master kept nodding as he listened. His gaze towards Tai Qingyi, Badao Jiang, and Peng Yu also became much gentler. Yang Qindong's emotions calmed down and everyone couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. Even Minister Kuang Yi, who originally didn't know what happened, looked much calmer. His mind was spinning rapidly as he thought about the origin of the current situation, the cause and effect, and what kind of impact it would have on himself and the southern Ming Empire. Time passed quickly while he was deep in thought. About an hour later, the Wolf Fang Special Forces finally appeared. Captain Tai, who, along with his team members King Kong, Violent Ape, and a few others, appeared with a relatively thin man in tow. The sixth young master. This is the person who ambushed the assassin and destroyed the evidence. He ran very quickly and took some effort. Captain Tai, whose voice rang out as the Langya Special Forces pressed the assassin to kneel on the ground. Everyone's gaze naturally fell on the assassin. However, even in the face of so many murderous glares, the assassin didn't show the slightest bit of fear. Instead, he looked at Yang Qindong, who was 2 meters away, and laughed loudly. "Brat, you dare to help the southern Ming Empire go against our Jiaoji? Even if we can't kill you today, you won't have a good ending the next time. You will live in fear forever, ha." After a few laughs, a piece of his tongue suddenly fell to the ground. He had actually killed himself by biting his tongue. Before coming here, Tai Hu and the others had carefully checked the assassin's mouth. After confirming that there was no poison, they were relieved to reattach his chin so that he could speak normally. However, no one had expected him to commit suicide by biting his tongue so straightforwardly. One must know that a person who could do such a thing so resolutely must be extremely ruthless. Perhaps it was easy for a person to be ruthless to others, but it was really rare to be so ruthless to oneself. After vaguely revealing his purpose, the assassin's mission was considered completed. He died in front of Yang Qindong. This scene shocked even Tai Hu. He quickly half-knelt on the ground and begged for forgiveness. However, Yang Qindong waved his hand and stopped him. "Forget it. It's not your fault that such a person had the will to die." Of course, Yang Qindong could tell that the assassin was a man of sacrifice. From the moment he appeared, he did not intend to live anymore. He was even willing to live to see Yang Qindong just to say what he had just said. In the end, he just wanted to be a guide and point the way. As for his claim that he had been ordered by Jiaoji, who would believe that? Regardless of who had ordered him to do so, the possibility of Kuang Ye's instigation had to be eliminated. Whether the assassination of Hu Yen and Madame Shui was successful or not, it would only anger Yang Qindong. As long as he was not a fool, he would not carry out such an audacious plan in his own territory. "Minister Xia, I'm a little confused. I'd like to return to the military camp first. As for what we talked about earlier, please do it quickly." Yang Qindong stood up and did not apologize to Kuang Yi. "Although this matter was definitely not ordered by this person, it happened in your territory and within your jurisdiction. Based on this point, it would not be too much to wrong you." Of course, Kuang Yi understood this. He hated the uselessness of his subordinates for allowing the mercenaries to enter the city so easily. He also hated the fact that these assassins chose to act in Gaozhou Prefecture and implicated him. However, at the same time he was happy. No matter who had sent the assassins, they had successfully angered Yang Qindong. Based on this alone, he did not need to urge these mercenaries to be ruthless in the future when faced with the rebel army of King Min. Gaozhou Prefecture, which had just been occupied by the mercenaries, was returned just like that. At the same time, Kuang Yi and his thousands of soldiers were given freedom. "Teacher. Minister Xia." Seeing Guanyin, Ma Wei, Yu Guang and the others' wronged and ashamed expressions, Kuang Yi waved his hand magnanimously. "Forget it. It's not that you are too incompetent. It's just that the mercenaries are too powerful. From now on, you will see the difference between us. Train well. Even if you had more than half of the mercenaries' abilities, the southern Ming Empire would not have fallen into such a passive situation." Chapter 450. From Kuang Ye's words, it could be seen how optimistic he was about the mercenaries and how helpless he was about the southern Ming army. The mercenaries protected Yang Qindong as they walked out of Gaozhou Prefectural City. However, the sixth young master didn't immediately return to the carriage. Instead, he walked with the Lung Feng soldiers. He would do as much as he could to get closer to the military as he could. After all, the army was the foundation of a country. If he didn't have control of the army, then the so-called political power was just a joke. Seeing Yang Qindong walking casually among the troops, the people around him didn't relax. Especially Luo Pe, the leader of the second group of the Cold Front, they were extremely cautious. Even the safety of the 95 style on their backs had been removed. They looked like they were ready to fight any battle at any time. Feeling everyone's nervousness, Yang Qindong chuckled and revealed a very confident expression. There's no need to be nervous. As long as Kuang Yi is here, the southern Ming army won't dare to be our enemy. Right now their biggest enemy is still the Min King's rebel army. Since Yang Qindong, who had always been meticulous, made such a statement, the surrounding Lung Feng soldiers naturally relaxed a lot. However, at the same time, there were smart people who heard the different meaning in his words. For example, Tiger's Mane asked the question in his heart. Young master, if that's the case, they won't be our enemy now, but they will be in the future, right? When Tiger's Mane asked this question, the Lung Feng soldiers around Yang Qindong all pricked up their ears. Clearly, this was something they were very concerned about. That's right. Without making Tiger's Mane and the others wait, Yang Qindong nodded with certainty. But it's not that they want to be our enemy, it's that we want to be their enemy. Although the Ming dynasty is still prosperous, some of its policies are no longer popular. Water can carry a boat, but it can also capsize a boat. Everyone should know this. If we don't reform, then even if we don't do anything, other people will replace us. Yang Qindong's words were not alarmist. Although the great Ming dynasty in this period of history had only entered the middle period and gradually weakened, because of his appearance, too many changes had occurred. For example, the division of the great Ming dynasty into the north and south was the most obvious difference. A powerful country was suddenly split into two halves. Whether it was military strength or economic foundation, they would all suffer a serious blow. In addition, the country's policies were already rotten to the core. Even if he did not make a move, the Ming dynasty would not last as long as it did in history. When Yang Qindong said that there was a problem with the national policy, he was referring to the policy of emphasizing agriculture and suppressing commerce. Although China had always been like this in ancient times, believing that agriculture was the foundation of the country, believing that all labor should be engaged in agriculture and not in industry and commerce. As the saying went, one more person engaged in industry and commerce meant one less person engaged in agriculture. It seemed like this idea was very reasonable. In fact, it was precisely because of this argument that the previous dynasties did not have a large population. Could it be that the monarchs in history did not see the benefits of having more people? Could it be that only Taizu said that there was strength in numbers and that it was easier to do things with more people? Of course not. With more people, it would be more convenient to do anything, especially the recruitment of soldiers. Whether it was the number of people or the quality of the soldiers, it would improve a lot. But why was it that there was a truth that everyone understood, but which dynasty would really implement it? Even when the country was stable, they would relax the training of the army and even the expansion of the personnel. In the face of the country's crisis, they did not even have a decent army. As a result, they were defeated again and again, losing political power and everything. Naturally, it was not that they could not see all this, but it was limited by the environment. The most important point was the food problem. There was only so much land and there was a limit to the food. If the population increased, there would definitely not be enough food to eat. This was the most important reason that hindered their development. For example, in the 100 years from the reign of Kangxi to the reign of Qianlong, the price of rice in Jiangnan had increased by 4 times, and the price of fields had increased by more than 10 times. For those poor commoners who did not have the money to eat meat, rice was their rigid demand. Then the problem was, what if they could not afford to buy rice? If they could not even feed themselves, how could they have more children and create a larger population? Fortunately, there were still sweet potatoes in the Qing dynasty. Although its taste was simple and its nutritional value was not high, it could still fill the stomach. Therefore, some people jokingly called the Kangxi and Qianlong age the sweet potato age. There was a certain reason for this. Therefore, in this way the land became the foundation of the country. How to let the people have more land and let them have enough food and clothing. When they were rich, naturally the country would be rich and strong. This was what people meant by hiding wealth among the people. But it was this truth that many people did not understand. On the contrary, soon after a dynasty was established, a privileged class would quickly appear. And this privilege showed that they would have a large area of land in a very short period of time. In the beginning it might not be much, but as they continued to develop, they would naturally have to seize more land from the people to maintain their power and enjoy a high and luxurious life. They had no choice but to compete with the people for benefits. Take Yang Qindong for example. After he was conferred the title of Duke of Loyalty, he also had his own legal land, and he was given more than 5,000 mu. Because the Ming dynasty was divided into the north and south, in order to discuss Zhu Qizhen, Dai Zongqiyu deliberately gave the fief to Jianghu in the south, making this fief impossible. But not everyone was like Yang Qindong, who was feared by the emperor. Most of the nobles who got their hands on land actually benefited from it. So where did these benefits come from? Of course, they could only invade the powerless ordinary people. As a result, the stable life of many ordinary people was broken. They went from owning land themselves to being tenants, which was to rent the land of the rich. Over time, life would become more and more difficult. In order to survive, all kinds of thoughts would appear and be produced. Think about it, when a person's life was a problem, what sense of responsibility and national honor did you expect them to have? For people like this, once there was a war, they would be lucky if they didn't turn around and fight against you. How could you expect them to work for you? More importantly, these privileged people were exempted from taxes. This was equivalent to completely wasting the best land in the country. If this continued in the long run, how could the country not be destroyed and how could it not be attacked by groups? This was the problem with the Ming dynasty's national policy that Yang Qindong said. And if this national policy was not changed, even if the Qing dynasty did not appear later, it would still be replaced by other forces. Then again, was there a way to solve this problem? Of course there was. As people often said, as long as one was willing to use one's brain, there would always be more ways than difficulties. At least in the face of the current situation, Yang Qindong had a way to solve the problem, and that was to walk with more legs. If a country wanted to develop, to be strong, and to stand at the top of the world, it was absolutely impossible to walk with only one leg. It must be diversified. This meant that not only did they need agriculture but they also needed industry. Once the country was strong and the people were rich, everyone could live a life without worrying about food and clothing. Then, who would think of rebelling for no reason? Even if there were some people who had such thoughts and wanted to bewitch others, there must be people who dared to agree. How many people would agree to not live a good life and take risks and even lose their heads? In particular, Yang Qindong attracted potatoes which had a high yield and could fill the stomach, which was tantamount to solving the problem fundamentally. Then, as long as the land in the hands of the powerful people was weakened and let the people have it again, these people would be guided to develop light industry, handicraft industry, and heavy industry. Then they would be able to become rich. Then it would be good for everyone. Just like Yang Qindong himself, he was developing with such thoughts. All kinds of factories were opened in Qichen City, and the land further away was developed and planted with all kinds of crops. Moreover, with the mild temperature there, many crops could be harvested twice a year, or even thrice. With food, work, and money to earn, good days would naturally come. After that, it became a matter of how to ensure that the fruits of one's victory would not be taken away by others. Naturally, more people would take the initiative to join the army. Take Lung Feng for example. Pride was one thing, but more than that, they wanted to protect the fruits of their labor, protect their home. In order to achieve this goal, they would really put their lives on the line. This was a completely different concept from the Ming dynasty soldiers who were paid. With the right path and a good foundation, and with the help of advanced weapons that were several hundred years ahead of the modern world, it was really hard to think of anyone who could be a match for them. This also created the legend of Lung Feng being invincible. Thinking up to this point, Yang Qindong's eyes were filled with hope and desire when he looked forward. In this life he was destined to bring the Han people to the peak of the world. No one could stop him. What happened in the prefectural city of Gaozhou was quickly discovered by the spies of King Min who had been keeping a close eye on this place. After the news spread, the prepared lobbyist, the eloquent Qin Tian, went straight to Gaozhou prefecture. At the same time, the secret letter written by Kuang Yi had also been sent to Nanjing City, to the front of Zhu Qizhen of the Ying sect. Kuang Yi actually managed to convince Yang Qindong, and more importantly, his opponent even assisted him. Jiaoji actually sent people to assassinate Yang Qindong's wife. This forced the Duke of Loyal Courage to do something even if he wanted to. Chapter 451. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Yang Qindong only wanted the ships that were no longer in use by the Songjiang prefecture. Zhu Qizhen could naturally afford this price. He waved his hand and approved Kuang Ye's report. While sending someone to reply, he also informed the Songjiang prefecture to prepare for the handover of the ships and the preparation work to take out all the steel in the prefecture's inventory. Zhu Qizhen's side had a positive response. Qin Tian also came to the Miao army camp that was stationed near Gaozhou prefecture. Miao Jinlong was one of the leaders of the Miao tribe. Now that he had an army of 60,000, his identity was naturally noble. However, knowing Qin Tian's identity, he still warmly prepared a banquet when Qin Tian arrived. Qin Tian was one of the important strategists of the Ming king. As the saying goes, there are 7 ranks in front of the prime minister. No one would want to offend a close official like him unless it was necessary. Not to mention he had come here to solve the problem in the first place. Naturally, Qin Tian didn't reject Miao Jinlong's warm hospitality. Not only that, but he also explained his mission during the banquet. He also wanted to hear Miao Jinlong's attitude and reaction. After all, they had fought with mercenaries before, so they should be familiar with this Duke of Loyalty. Miao Jinlong knew Qin Tian's purpose of coming. Especially when he heard that Qin Tian wanted to lead the mercenaries to the Jianghu kingdom, he raised his hand and agreed wholeheartedly. Due to the geographical location, the Miao people had always been at odds with the Jianghu people. Now that there was a chance to weaken the other party's strength, it was of course a good thing. Miao Jinlong was overjoyed. He called out the scholar Zoda and gave him a detailed explanation of what he had learned so far. From Zoda's words, Qin Tian had a better understanding of the mercenaries. He was even more determined to lead the trouble to them. Therefore he only rested for one night. The next morning he had someone send a letter to the mercenaries. First, he stated his identity and the purpose of his visit. Since ancient times, there was a saying that the envoys would not be killed when 2 armies fought. But in reality the people who died as envoys did not know who they were. Before he understood the attitude of the mercenaries, mainly Yang Qindong, Qin Tian would of course not appear rashly. Even if the other party didn't kill him and handed him over to Kuang Yi, he would suffer a fate worse than death. Once the letter reached the mercenary camp, it was quickly delivered to Yang Qindong. When Yang Qindong saw that it was Qin Tian who had come to visit, he was only stunned for a moment before he smiled. It was really like someone delivering a pillow to him when he was feeling sleepy. After the discussion with Kuang Yi, Yang Qindong guessed that Zhu Qizhen would definitely agree to his request if he didn't care about the title of king with a different surname. After all, the king of Min's faction had directly affected the political power of the southern Ming dynasty. But Yang Qindong had been thinking about how to treat King Min's people these days. With the strength of the mercenaries, coupled with the sufficient weapons just sent by the marine, it is not difficult to deal with them face to face. However, if he really did that, the pressure on the southern Ming Empire would decrease, and they would definitely consider dealing with him. This kind of strategy of swallowing wolves and luring tigers was not what Yang Qindong wanted to see. Just because he needed a large number of Han people, he couldn't fall out with the southern Ming Empire. Otherwise, even if he went on a crusade and conquered a large area of land, who would be in charge of it? Let the foreign race take over? This was absolutely impossible. If this was the case, it was unwise to be the enemy of the southern Ming Empire. What he wanted was to slowly digest and change, not kill a lot of Han people to show his strength or build a country similar to the Ming dynasty. If that was the case, it was just a change of dynasty. Once many years had passed, what was the difference between the Ming dynasty and other historical dynasties? The so-called Great Yang Qindong began to think about how to solve the crisis of the southern Ming Empire without making them too big. Once his strength rose to a certain level, it would be time for him to come back and reap the fruits of victory. After thinking for a few days, he finally had some ideas. If he wanted to do this, he must obtain the support of one person, and that is the Ming king. As mentioned before, if Yang Qindong wanted to dominate and not just build a country, he needed a large number of people. Then how large is this large number of people? To put it simply, the more the better. According to Yang Qindong's intention, he didn't just want to conquer the Ming dynasty in the future. On the contrary, in order to maintain the growth of the population here, he might want to conquer this place in the future. What he wanted was not just Asia but the entire world. He wanted the Han people to stand at the top of the world. Wherever you go, your identity as a Han person is incomparably noble. If you are lucky enough to be born in a Han family, then you will be like a noble from birth. Wouldn't it be difficult to achieve this? Of course it was difficult. However, for the various advanced weapons in the warehouse, and the munitions factories that Chichen City had given enough conditions and books, the production of new weapons would only increase. As long as the quality of the army was good enough, and there were enough numbers, firearms would have an absolute advantage over spears and swords. This also meant that this idea was destined to not be a dream, and there was a chance to achieve it. There was a problem. After conquering so many territories, how would they rule? That would require a large number of Han people to do it. Without people, even if they could conquer this place, they wouldn't be able to become the ruler of this place. It was just like when the Japanese entered China. How powerful were they at that time? They were even an existence that could sweep through the entire Asia. There were even times when they created an example where a few dozen people could manage a county with hundreds of thousands of people. So what? In the end, if they wanted to devour an elephant, their stomachs would explode. Although there were some other factors, it was undeniable that if they had enough people, they might be able to achieve their goal. Speaking of which, if they wanted to have more people, they couldn't make the Han people under the rule of the Ming dynasty their enemy. Otherwise, if they fought to their heart's content, they wouldn't have enough officials and soldiers who would listen to them and were loyal to them. Even if they destroyed southern Ming and Beiming, the country would still be in chaos. Once chaos began, who knew how many people would die and how many years it would take to restore the population to 60 million? Even if it was 60 million, Yang Qindong still felt that it wasn't enough. Fortunately, after the appearance of potatoes, the food problem of the people was greatly alleviated. Now, whether it was Beiming or southern Ming, they were encouraging people to have more children. From the looks of it, the country's population might increase exponentially in 10 years. The appearance of these new people might increase his chances of achieving his goal. However, the prerequisite was that the Han people's population couldn't be reduced for no reason. For this reason, Yang Qindong couldn't be enemies with the Han people under the king of Min for no reason. What he really wanted to deal with was the foreign race, Jiaoji. Jiaoji was now an ally of the king of Min. How to bypass them to deal with Jiaoji was the problem that Yang Qindong was thinking about these days. At this time, one of the important officials of the king of Min, Qin Tian, wanted to see him. If this wasn't an opportunity, then what was? Thinking about the appearance of the assassin Mo Tua a while ago, he was from Jiaoji. In addition, there was more accurate information from the inside. Mo Tuo's attack was originally the decision of the king of Min's higher-ups. They wanted to kill with a borrowed knife. With this accurate information from the inside, Yang Qindong could guess the main reason for Qin Tian's visit even if he used his big toe. Or rather, this was what Yang Qindong hoped for. This was exactly what he wanted. Even so, Yang Qindong only kept the joy in his heart. On the surface, he still pretended to be indifferent. Never let your opponent know what you were thinking. This kind of person was truly qualified and an excellent diplomat. Young master already knows about this. Arrange for him to come over tomorrow. Tiger's mane, go and contact him first. Yang Qindong didn't say much. In fact, he didn't need to say much. Tiger's mane was one of the closest people to him. He always knew what he was thinking. It was necessary to wait for the right price to sell. Since he had obtained so many benefits from the southern Ming Empire, there was no reason for the king of Min to not do anything. Young master, don't worry. Tiger's mane promised as if he knew everything. In the end, his role was the vanguard. At the same time, he was paving the way to raise the status of the young master. The mercenaries quickly replied and promised that Qin Tian could come to the barracks tomorrow to discuss the matter. They also said that he could come openly and didn't need to consider the reaction of the southern Ming army in Gaozhou. These words were a little generous. Not for other reasons, but through these matters, it could be seen that the relationship between the Duke of Loyal and the southern Ming Empire wasn't very good. The southern Ming Emperor Zhu Qizhen was very afraid of Yang Qindong. This was already public news. Now it seemed that it wasn't wrong. Qin Tian, who received a reply, was naturally very happy. He thought about how to persuade Yang Qindong when he saw him several times. He also thought about the possible unexpected situations several times. Early the next morning, he brought a group of men and went straight to the barracks of the mercenaries. When they left the barracks of the Miao army, Miao Jinlong sent people to escort them. However, when they were about to reach the city of Gaozhou, the mercenaries in camouflage took over and brought them over. This kind of thing was done in front of the eyes of the southern Ming army. General Yu Guang, who was in charge of guarding the city, gritted his teeth. As early as last night, Yang Qindong sent people into the city to inform Kuang Yi that the king of Min sent people to talk to him. He also agreed and hoped that they would make things convenient. Chapter 452. When the letter was placed in front of him, Kuang Yi knew that he couldn't refuse. Not to mention that for the stability of the southern Ming Empire, they couldn't afford to offend the powerful mercenaries. Just a few days ago, Hu Yan and Madame Shui almost died in the city. They were responsible. They didn't pursue the matter because they knew that it had nothing to do with them. However, if he didn't agree to the envoy sent by Min King to meet with Yang Qindong, then the other party could bring up this matter at any time. At that time, they could casually accuse them of colluding with the assassins. This would make it difficult for them to defend themselves. Face was given to each other. Fortunately, Kuang Yi knew that Yang Qindong still had the Yang family manor in Beiming. The southern Ming Empire had Jianghu and brother Yangtze. He couldn't betray the great Ming Empire and didn't dare to do it. Therefore he made the decision and agreed to the request. Kuang Yi agreed. This was also why Yu Guang didn't dare to act rashly when he saw all this happening right under his nose. The mercenaries were only a squad of soldiers. They brought Qin Tian and his hundreds of subordinates through the city. To be honest, Qin Tian was a little nervous at this moment. Originally, he thought that the mercenaries would send at least a few hundred people, or even a few thousand people to escort him. However, there were only 10 people and they had to walk through the city controlled by the southern Ming army. This was no longer a matter of safety. It was a provocation. Would the southern Ming army really do something in anger? If that was the case, wouldn't his life be over? With this kind of nervousness, the group smoothly walked through the city of Gaozhou. When Qin Tian saw that the city had been left behind, he suddenly felt a burst of cold wind at the back of his head. At this moment, he remembered that he hadn't walked out of the gates of hell. He had just stepped into this place. For example, if he didn't have an agreement with Yang Qindong this time, how would he return to the Miao family's camp from the mercenaries' camp? Without the mercenaries' escort, how could he guarantee his safety? Only at this moment did he feel fear. In the mercenary camp, Tiger's Mane, representing Yang Qindong, met Qin Tian first. He served him good food and wine, fulfilling his role as a host. Qin Tian didn't expect to see Yang Qindong the moment he arrived. Fortunately, he was prepared for this. After investigating Yang Qindong, he knew what kind of person Tiger's Mane was and the importance of his position. So while he was eating, he ordered his men to carry 2 big boxes of gold and place them in front of Tiger's Mane. One box was worth 1,000 taels of gold, so 2 boxes would be worth 2,000 taels of gold. According to the exchange rate of 1 to 8, that would be 16,000 taels of silver. To an ordinary citizen, this amount of silver was more than enough to eat and drink for a lifetime. And this was just Qin Tian's greeting gift. He had already explained to Tiger's Mane that as long as he could meet the Duke of Loyalty, there would be more than 10 times the amount in front of him. The first gift was more than 100,000 taels of silver, and it wasn't even given to the main person. From this, it seemed that Qin Tian was very sincere. Tiger's Mane also stared greedily at the silver in front of him. I can try to see if you can meet my duke, but do you know that Yingzhong has already promised to give Songjiang prefectures and used shipyard to my duke? In comparison, if it's just some gold and silver, I'm afraid it's not sincere enough. He wasn't afraid of making a request, but he was afraid of not saying anything. Qin Tian's eyes were filled with excitement. Of course, we won't just take out these things. In order to show our Min King's sincerity, there are already 500 carriages of steel being sent here. It should arrive in a few days. 500 carriages? Tiger's Mane pretended to be very surprised and then nodded. Well, then I'll try to help you put in a few good words. Tiger's Mane was only willing to help because of the silver. Thank you, General Tiger. If we can achieve our goal this time, Qin Tian will still have more rewards. Ha, you're too kind, Tiger's Mane said with a greedy face and poured a cup of wine directly into his stomach. And on the same night, Qin Tian was allowed to meet Yang Qindong. He met the extremely young but powerful Duke of Loyalty of the Ming dynasty. Qin Tian greets the Duke of Loyalty. After meeting, Qin Tian's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. He cupped his hands and bowed respectfully. At this time, Yang Qindong was only 21 years old. However, after experiencing so much, he already had the demeanor of a superior person. If he was willing, he could reveal the aura of a superior person at any time. You are Qin Tian? Yang Qindong, who was sitting at the head of the tent, stared at the person who came and sized him up. Then he said very casually, I heard from Tiger's Mane that you are very good at doing things. You even want to give me a gift? Is it because your King of Min is afraid of me? Unlike the calmness he showed when he was with Lung Feng, at this moment, Yang Qindong showed a very arrogant side. Although Qin Tian looked submissive at this time, in fact he was quietly observing Yang Qindong. Before this, he had grasped a certain amount of data and even read a lot of intelligence. However, Qin Tian believed in everything he saw with his own eyes. Although the intelligence said that the Duke of Loyalty was courageous and talented, Qin Tian always thought that this person was still too young. Even if he was young, it was inevitable that he would lose his cool when something happened, especially when he had won repeatedly. It was inevitable that he would be arrogant. Now it seemed that it was true. Seeing that Yang Qindong had only glanced at him a few times before ignoring him with his nose in the air, not only did he not feel humiliated, on the contrary, he was very happy. It was good to have a weakness. As long as he could grasp it, it would be easy to deal with him. Yes, our King of Min really wants to be friends with you. You saved Emperor Ingzong without fear of death on the battlefield. You forced Walla's army to retreat with your excellent means. You even completely destroyed Master Huang's army in Guangdong in a very short time. Our King of Min is full of praise for all of these. Everyone liked to hear good words, and Yang Qindong was the same. Hearing Qin Tian talking about his achievements with great familiarity, he laughed and said, "Yes, these are all my achievements. Prince of Min is also a sensible person. If so, why didn't he retreat and surrender immediately after knowing my power? Don't tell me that you want me to lead an army to crush you and repeat Huang Yuliang's old path?" When speaking of these, Yang Qindong deliberately stared at him, as if he was going to scare him. Yes, Duke of Loyalty is very right. People had to bow under the eaves. As an excellent lobbyist, he knew when to show his weak side and when to show his strong side. With a submissive expression, Yang Qindong's expression became much better. Seeing that the sixth young master's temper was not so bad, Qin Tian hurriedly said what he wanted to say. Our King of Min really wants to be friends with you, Duke of Loyalty. He also knows that we will definitely lose if we fight with you. But when he heard the first part, Yang Qindong was still smiling. But when he heard the last part, his face changed. But what? But I dare not say what I want to say next. I am afraid that I will make you angry. Qin Tian looked up and showed an aggrieved expression. Just say what you want to say. I won't blame you. Say it quickly. Yang Qindong looked like he was fooled. Qin Tian knew that the opportunity had come. He straightened his body and said, "But if our King of Min stops now with Ingzong's personality, he will definitely settle the score. At that time it will be difficult to keep your life." Qin Tian was not surprised. So what? When the time comes, this duke will just greet his majesty. Yang Qindong said confidently. When Qin Tian heard this, he despised Yang Qindong very much. He thought, "You are just a duke. How can you boast like this?" But what he didn't know was that this was what Yang Qindong wanted to show him. "Thank you for your kindness, Duke of Loyalty." Although Qin Tian didn't agree with what Yang Qindong said, he still looked very grateful. When he saw the smile on the sixth young master's face, he mustered up his courage and said, "But I am afraid that Duke of Loyalty can't protect King of Min at that time. As far as I know, Emperor Ingzong seems to be on guard against Duke of Loyalty. Otherwise, the matter of conferring a prince with a different surname would not be delayed." He stopped here. When he said this, Qin Tian immediately stopped talking and carefully observed Yang Qindong's performance. He said it just now. If there was anything he wanted to say, he could say it casually. Now he shouldn't be blamed. Sure enough, Yang Qindong's face was flushed red and he was obviously very angry. He even pointed his finger at Qin Tian, who was standing below, but in the end he didn't say a word of reproach. "Brother Qin, what am I doing? Don't you know that this matter is the thing that annoys my duke the most?" Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side, said. He seemed to be reprimanding Qin Tian for being insensible, but in fact he was also reminding him. Qin Tian showed a grateful smile to Tiger's Mane. Then, his gaze fell on the angry Yang Qindong and said, "Duke of Loyalty, Emperor Ingzong is really infuriating. But thinking about it carefully, isn't it because you are too young and your qualifications are too shallow? If you can do something earth-shattering for the world to see, I think that when the time comes, even the stingy Emperor Ingzong can't refuse to be conferred a prince." Chapter 453. What do you mean? Speak more clearly. Yang Qindong, who was originally very angry, suddenly straightened his body and stared at Qin Tian with his tiger-like eyes. Since Yang Qindong placed so much importance on these words, Qin Tian was delighted that the other had fallen into his trap. He cupped his hands and said, "I am not talented, but I have an ingenious plan. As long as you can be the Duke of Loyal and Courageous, it will be easy for you to be bestowed the title of King of a different surname." He spoke with such confidence that Yang Qindong's interest was piqued. "What is it?" "Defeat the Jiaoji soldiers and show the strength of the Duke of Loyalty." With a determined face, Qin Tian, who was almost gritting his teeth, finally said what was in his heart. Phew. Exhaling a long breath in his heart, Yang Qindong said in his heart, "As expected, the other party really came for this." Although he was relieved, Yang Qindong pretended to be very shocked. "Defeat the Jiaoji soldiers? This is not possible. Why can't I?" Qin Tian asked in a pressing manner. "Jiaoji is so powerful, how can it be so easy to defeat them? Moreover, aren't they the allies of the King of Min? Since we are friends, shouldn't your allies be my friends as well? This is not good." Yang Qindong shook his head lightly and looked like he was talking to himself. When Qin Tian saw this, he felt a sense of disdain in his heart. Just now, he said that he was wise and powerful, and that he would destroy the king of Min's army and ask him to surrender. But when it came to the actual use of weapons, he could not do this and was afraid of that. He really did not understand how such a person could have achieved all those achievements in the past. Qin Tian really despised him in his heart, but he still tried to persuade him. Duke of Loyalty, although Jiaoji is our ally, they are still of a foreign race. As the saying goes, those who are not of our race will have different opinions. The attitude of Rongdi is not the same as that of Hua. No matter what, the king of Min is the king of the great Ming. He has the pure bloodline of the ancestor. How can he tolerate a foreign race doing whatever they want in the great Ming? Previously we had no choice but to form an alliance. But in fact we were wary of each other. In the end we were just using each other's relationship. There is no affection. Qin Tian said this righteously and continued, unlike our king of Min who really appreciates Duke Zhongdan. Moreover, we are all Han people, so we should get closer to each other. Not to mention, this can help the Duke of Loyalty achieve great things and become the king of a foreign race. This kind of helping others is what the king of Min likes the most. What Qin Tian said was magnanimous, and he also pretended to be good for Yang Qindong. But in fact, this was not the case at all. The people of the Security Bureau had already sent back the news that the king of Jiaoji had taken a fancy to the king of Min's sister, Zhu Lian, who was also Princess Yongxing and wanted to marry her. Because of this, the king of Min was furious and said that his sister was willing to marry a foreign race's little king. This was almost the same meaning as when the kingdom of Dongwu wanted to marry Guan Yu's daughter and was rebutted. Although this time the king of Min took advantage of the power of Jiaoji to rise up. But in the end, the king of Min still looked down on the small country of Jiaoji. They were just a small province of the great Ming before and did not have any cultural inheritance. How could such a person be qualified to marry his sister? Not to mention that there was such a big gap in age. Princess Yongxing was the king of Annan Lily when he was 18 years old. In history he did not live until 1451, but because of his representative, the Longzi borrowed this person's name to let him live longer. The spectators have a strong historical knowledge, so don't doubt the Longzi on this issue. Thank you very much. He was already more than 60 years old. This was clearly pushing his sister into the fire pit. As the elder brother, and now with such great power, if he could not even protect his own sister, what would others say about him? Just based on this point, the relationship between the king of Min, Zhu Huixing, and the Jiaoji army started to drift apart. In addition, along the way the Jiaoji army burned, killed, and looted everywhere they passed. They were very overboard and caused the people's lives to be in chaos. The king of Min had already made up his mind to deal with them. It was precisely because of these things that Qin Tian came here to fan the flames and wanted to use someone else to do his dirty work. In their eyes, as long as the two sides could fight, regardless of whether Yang Qindong won in the end or the Jiaoji army won in the end, it would be beneficial to them. Since that was the case, why should they be polite? Qin Tian had his own plans, but he did not know that the handsome young man Yao Yingjun, who was on good terms with Princess Yongxing Zhu Lian, was an important spy that the Security Bureau had placed in the other side. The information regarding this had already been sent back, and Yang Qindong was well aware of it. This was the importance of information. If he knew everything in advance, he would have more time to deal with it, and he would be able to find the best way to solve the problem. What Qin Tian said was extremely righteous. From the perspective of the nation and country, even if Yang Qindong knew the truth, he would not correct it. Wasn't all of this what he wanted to do? Since he could not do anything to the Han people? Then it should not be a problem to deal with the foreign races, especially Jiaoji, the predecessor of the modern Vietnam. They had betrayed the country several times and angered the brave People's Liberation Army, causing them to kill their way into their territory. The most hateful thing was that the other party's military warehouse was filled with all sorts of goods that were made in China. That kind of feeling must have been very chilling. In order to prevent such things from happening in the future, Yang Qindong made up his mind to deal with them a few hundred years in advance, so that those disgusting things would never happen again and would disappear forever. With this in mind, Yang Qindong did not expose some of Qin Tian's lies. Instead, he went along with Qin Tian's words and asked, "Against Jiaoji, will you support me?" Qin Tian's face changed from his heroic speech to a trace of awkwardness. "This means that we cannot support you in terms of military strength. After all, everyone knows that they are our Min King's allies. Don't worry, Duke of Loyalty. Although we won't send troops, we will support you in other aspects, such as provisions and information. As long as you don't send troops, we, King of Min, will fully support you if you need anything else. As if he was afraid that Yang Qindong would have some misgivings, Qin Tian patted his chest and promised. Is that so? Yang Qindong did not answer immediately. Instead, he fell into deep thought as if he was thinking carefully. Yang Qindong's lack of response caused Qin Tian to lose his confidence. He was afraid that Yang Qindong would reject him, so he quickly signaled to Tiger's Mane, who was standing at the side and receiving benefits from him, with his eyes. Tiger's Mane hesitated at first, but soon made a decision. He looked at Yang Qindong and said, Duke, Jiaoji has gone too far. Didn't they try to assassinate you 2 days ago? If we don't teach them a lesson, won't we be looked down upon and become a joke to the world? Yes. Qin Tian slapped his head. How could he have forgotten about this? He quickly said, Jiaoji sent people to assassinate me. This is really shameful and hateful. Just based on this point alone, we have to teach them a lesson. This is the only way to show the dominance of the loyal and courageous Duke. That's true. Yang Qindong slowly raised his head and agreed. However, he soon shook his head. No, if we were to fight with the Jiaoji soldiers and the Min King suddenly attacked us from behind, we won't be able to withstand a pincer attack. When he heard Yang Qindong's concerns, Qin Tian immediately replied, That is impossible. Our Min King is a man of his words. He would never do something so treacherous. Jiaoji is your ally. Yang Qindong ignored Qin Tian's solemn vow. He only said one sentence and the other party was instantly silenced. But what does the loyal Duke want us to do for you to be completely assured? Qin Tian did not know how to convince Yang Qindong. Even though they had decided not to fight with the mercenaries in the short term, there were some things that others would not believe even if he said it. Show me your sincerity. Let's ask the Min King to write a declaration of war and spread it throughout the world, stating that he and Jiaoji have completely broken up. This way I will believe your sincerity and will send troops. How about that? In addition, you have just occupied Yunnan, Guangxi and Guangdong provinces. I believe you have a lot of captives in your hands. Coincidentally, the leader of the mercenaries, the big brother that I saved, is in need of people. You should also show some sincerity and make my big brother happy. Not a lot, just 100,000 people. Men, women, old and young are acceptable. Yang Qindong proposed the plan that he had decided on long ago. Yang Qindong, who understood the situation of the Min King, naturally knew that the other party did not like the Jiaoji army and would not make a move on him in the short term. However, there was always a possibility. Before the situation changed, who knew what would happen in the future? Most importantly, if he wanted to do this, he would need the support of Nanming. This declaration of war became very important. This was also the reason why he could convince Minister Kuangya to not make an enemy out of the Min King and the Miao army and focus on dealing with Jiaoji. Without this declaration of war, how would others believe him if he just said it himself? At least, it would be easier for him to ask for 100,000 people. He had just occupied 3 provinces. Others might not have it, but he had a lot of people in his territory. Moreover, he did not only want young people. In this way, he could also help the other party solve the problem of having too many people but not enough food. Yang Qindong proposed his own request. This time it was Qin Tian's turn to consider. 100,000 people was indeed a problem. He could just give more to the older children and less to the young men. He could make the decision on this issue. If he wanted to make a declaration, it would not be a big deal. However, would people say that the Min King was burning the bridge after crossing the river? After all, they were able to rise so quickly because of the Jiaoji army's help in the beginning. Chapter 454. While Qin Tian was still considering the gains and losses, Yang Qindong spoke again. Jiaoji is a foreign tribe after all. If Prince of Min really wants to achieve something in the future, it would be best for you to draw a clear line with them. They were not like the Miao people. They had been living on this land for generations and were used to being in each other's company. Jiaoji people were very independent. If they were to become successful one day, it would be enough for His Highness, Prince of Min, to be very busy. Of course, you can go back and discuss this with Prince of Min. We are not in a hurry. Yang Qindong was indeed not in a hurry. Regardless of whether it was the steel that Zhu Qizhen wanted to give him or the steel that Prince of Min gave him, they had not arrived yet. With the mindset that having the steel in his hands was the way of the king, he would not do anything as long as these benefits were not in his hands. Even though he was already mentally prepared to fight Jiaoji, he still had to take things one step at a time. Qin Tian thought that there were some things that he could not decide, so he raised his head and said seriously, "Then I will report it to His Highness King Min." I think it will not take long for Duke Zhongdan to give a satisfactory answer. But please rest assured that regardless of whether this matter is successful or not, we have no intention of becoming enemies with Duke of Loyalty and the mercenaries. Yang Qindong nodded satisfactorily at the other party's goodwill. Good. As long as Prince of Min's army and the Miao army do not make things difficult for us, we will not take the initiative to cause trouble. You can rest assured about this. This was considered an agreement that both parties agreed upon. Based on this agreement, Qin Tian did not come here in vain. Thinking that Prince of Min still had to make a decision on the declaration of war, and thinking that Jiaoji was pressuring him step by step, he decided to take his leave. Following this, Lung Feng naturally sent them out of the camp. Unlike when he came, the hundreds of chests of gold and silver that Qin Tian brought were all placed in the mercenaries' camp. This was originally a show of sincerity. Since the negotiations went smoothly, there was no mention of taking back the chests. Not long after Qin Tian left, Tiger's Mane represented him on a trip to Gaozhou's prefectural city. He followed the young master's instructions and explained the key points of this negotiation to the other party. Kuang Yi was waiting for news in the government office. Since Yang Qindong sent someone to inform him that there would be an envoy from King of Min, Kuang Yi could not sit still. Yang Qindong and his mercenaries were so powerful that he was shocked more than once. The current southern Ming Empire was already riddled with holes. They were already facing huge difficulties. If the mercenaries switched sides at this time, the southern Ming Empire would really be in danger. It was precisely because he knew the severity of the matter that he didn't have a single moment of rest in the 2 days since Qin Tian had passed through the city and arrived at the mercenary camp. Because of this matter, Guan Ying, Ma Wei, and the others repeatedly tried to persuade him. For example, they said that Yang Qindong's fourth brother was still in Jianghu. If the Duke of Loyal Courage dared to make a move, they could use his fourth brother to threaten him. Some people even suggested that when Qin Tian passed through the city, they could kill the envoy directly. By then, it would be more difficult for the Duke of Loyal Courage to ally with King of Min. In the face of these schemes, by the time they reached Kuang Yi, they were all rejected by him. Now Yang Qindong had not made a final decision. If they pushed him so hard, it would be easy for him to be pushed to the side of the opponent. If so, they would really be sinners for all eternity. Kuang Yi, who was already very old, would not agree to such a risky thing. Not to mention, based on his understanding of Yang Qindong, this person was very considerate of the overall situation. Otherwise, he would not send troops to Guangdong to quell the rebellion of the Yellow Bandits without receiving any benefits. It was only because the Emperor, Zhu Qizhen, did not believe in all kinds of things that led to the current situation that was not very good. Thinking of the Emperor, Zhu Qizhen, Kuang Yi also felt a headache. Since ancient times, the imperial power was the greatest. This was indisputable. But there was a premise for everything, that was, the imperial power was consolidated. When the power was strong, it was really the greatest. On the contrary, if you were not strong enough and still wanted others to obey you, then the emperor was not sensible. Not all the generals in the world were like Yu Fei, who could be called back with 12 gold medals. Who was Yang Qindong? If one looked carefully, he had been wandering outside the imperial power. In fact, with the powerful mercenaries as his backing, he also had such strength. In the face of such a strong soldier, the most important thing to do was to find a way to make friends with him and play the emotional card, instead of oppressing him with power and finally making a loss. Of course, although Kuang Yi was also an important minister, he could not represent the emperor in many things. Some things he just thought in his heart. If he really wanted to say that he really wanted to blame Zhu Qizhen, he did not have the power to do so, let alone the ability to bear the consequences. While Kuang Yi's thoughts were still in torment, Tiger's Mane came. This was Yang Qindong's closest person. Many times his appearance could represent his master. In the main hall, Kuang Yi saw Tiger's Mane. Although he did not personally come out to greet him, his waiting figure in front of the hall was enough to give Tiger's Mane face. Who was Tiger's Mane? In these years, after being trained by Yang Qindong, he was no longer the little follower of the past. This meant that he was reluctant to leave Yang Qindong. Otherwise, if he was casually sent back to Tsushan City, he would be in existence on the same level as Lung Song and Gao Xiong. It was not impossible for him to be higher than them. Seeing that Kuang Yi was waiting outside the hall, this kind of treatment made him feel flattered. He hurriedly took a few steps forward, clasped his fist and bowed. "This little Tiger's Mane greets the minister." Kuang Yi politely extended his hand and helped Tiger's Mane up. "Brother Tiger, there is no need to be so polite. Come, please sit in the hall. Servants, come and serve tea." Kuang Ye's face was full of enthusiasm. Tiger's Mane was also very respectful on the surface, but in his heart, he admired the young master even more. If it was not for the young master's strength, how could he be treated with such courtesy? One must know that this was the Minister of War, and also the Crown Prince's tutor. How could an ordinary person like him come into contact with him, let alone be treated with such courtesy? Tiger's Mane's thinking was correct. The Ming dynasty's hierarchy was very strict. An official was an official, and a citizen was a citizen. This was not something that could be confused at any time. Even if this official's position wasn't high and the other party was a rich gentleman, the official still had to be stronger in a real conversation. This was because he didn't just represent himself, he had the support of the entire team of scholars behind him. Not to mention a high official like Kuang Yi. Other than the emperor, there were very few people who could give him any face. But it was this kind of person with such a high position that was able to come out of the hall to greet him. If it were any other citizen, they would have already knelt on the ground, with tears flowing down their faces, as if they were willing to die for their friend. Exaggeratedly, even if they were immediately asked to die, there would probably be people who would agree. But all of this was completely different when it came to Tiger's Mane. Following the young master, and especially seeing the development of Crimson City, his vision had long been different from ordinary people. In his heart, even the emperors of the southern Ming dynasty and northern Ming dynasty could not be compared to his young master, let alone a minister of war. Moreover, a minister of war who was weak and defeated. With this confidence, when Tiger's Mane spoke to Kuang Yi, he maintained enough autonomy, neither servile nor overbearing, and did not have the slightest intention of lowering his head. Kuang Yi listened carefully to Tiger's Mane's report. When he first heard that there were 100,000 people, he did not seem to understand. After all, why would the mercenary army need so many Han people? But then when he heard that Yang Qindong asked the king of Min to make a public declaration of war against the Jiaoji army, his attention was completely diverted. He suddenly stood up from his chair. Did the king of Min agree? Not yet. Tiger's Mane acted as if he did not see Kuang Ye's excitement. He shook his head and said, "The messenger Qin Tian said that he would go back and discuss with the king of Min. But my young master also said that there would be no problem." Yang Qindong said that there would be no problem, so Kuang Yi was much more confident. It had been proven that on such a major issue, the Duke of Loyalty would not speak without thinking. And if this was the case, it would be great. Without the support of the Jiaoji army, the strength of the king of Min's faction would naturally be greatly reduced. At least in the short term, they would not have the strength to continue north. This would give southern Ming more time to breathe. Once they made good use of it, the recruited recruits would be trained, and it would be equivalent to having another powerful army. At that time, they would go all out to the south and solve the problem of the king of Min. Thinking that southern Ming finally saw the dawn of revival, Kuang Ye's spirit became much better. When he looked at Tiger's Mane, his tone became more determined. "Then I will have to trouble Brother Tiger to convey to the Duke of Loyalty that we thank him for everything he has done for southern Ming. If this matter is successful, it will be a great merit. I will report it to the emperor." Tiger's Mane felt that Kuang Ye's words were sincere. He cupped his fist and said, "I thank Minister for your kind words on behalf of my young master. Oh yes, my young master also said that once the king of Min really makes a public declaration of war, Minister, please give up on Gaozhou Prefecture for your own safety. Southern Ming should also take this opportunity to recuperate. Once the training of the new army is completed, then it will be time to go south and solve the problem of the king of Min. Before that, it is better not to act rashly. Otherwise, the situation will become very troublesome." Hu Meng's words were a little decisive, and even a little unpleasant to hear. The gist of it was that without the mercenaries here, Kuang Yi and his 1,000 men would not be able to defend Gaozhou Prefecture no matter what. At first glance, it did seem like he was looking down on them, but wasn't this the reality? Chapter 455. Not to mention the huge difference in military strength between the two sides, Gaozhou Prefecture was already an isolated city. Around him, except for the road back home in the northeast, the other directions were all occupied by the king of Min and the Miao people. In such a situation, even if they did not attack the city, they could surround Kuang Yi to death. The situation was like this. It was not because Tiger's Mane's words were unpleasant. Kuang Yi, who knew this, was not angry. Instead, he clasped his fist and thanked him. "I am grateful that Duke Zhongdan is still thinking for me. Brother Tiger, please go back and tell Duke Zhongdan that I am not an inflexible person. I will give up Gaozhou Prefecture and return to Nanjing to train the new army. Kuang Yi was so honest and admitted his shortcomings and weaknesses. This made Tiger's Mane think highly of him. Okay, I will pass on your words to my young master. I will take my leave now. While Tiger's Mane and Kuang Yi were talking, Yang Qindong called the two regiment commanders to discuss in the tent. Regiment Commander Liu, I have equipped all your auxiliary soldiers with Type 81 rifles. How are you guys getting used to it? After returning a simple and efficient military salute, Yang Qindong asked the auxiliary regiment commander Lu Zhua. The last time he fought with Miao Bing using cold weapons against cold weapons, the result was naturally a great victory. However, his side's losses were not small, at least in Yang Qindong's eyes. In order to preserve his sufficient strength and also to display his sufficient advantages, he decided to equip all the auxiliary soldiers on the battlefield with the 81 automatic rifle, which was commonly known as the 81 automatic rifle. The reason why they were not equipped with a better 95 style was because they wanted to differentiate the cold edge from the auxiliary weapons. Secondly, and more importantly, with the current strength of Crimson Nest City's arsenal, they were still unable to create the 95 style. Even for the Type 81 rifles, Yang Qindong first took out a large number of finished products for them to understand and disassemble. In addition, they already had the successful experience of their predecessors. A lot of information was found in the warehouse. It was because of all these advantages that the Type 81 assault rifle could be used. It had to be said that there was no lack of smart people everywhere, especially the craftsmen of the Great Ming dynasty. In terms of intelligence, they were no worse than the craftsmen of any other period. It was only because they didn't have enough development environment that they naturally went from being brilliant to being ordinary. During the Ming dynasty, craftsmen had very little social status and their income was extremely low. It was already considered good if they could fill their stomachs. Even so, there were still some people who wanted to invent something that was very practical and push the development of social science forward. Unfortunately, the person who made such a contribution did not receive a reward that was proportional to his efforts. There were even some people who gathered the materials for their own experiments. Once they succeeded, the fruits would belong to the Ministry of Works and the Emperor. The only thing they would get was the title of a good craftsman, which couldn't be eaten or exchanged for money. Under such a system without any incentives, it was easy to imagine that even the best craftsman would soon become a commoner. However, the same people in Yang Qindong's hands were completely different. The armament factory in Crimson City implemented a guaranteed incentive system. The guaranteed salary referred to how much money you would receive after completing the work at hand. The incentive system referred to how much you would receive after completing the task or making other contributions. In fact, the craftsmen of this dynasty did not lack strength and brains. Once there was space for them to display their abilities, everyone would hold their breaths and fiercely exert their strength. Because of this, many outstanding people appeared. Not only did they receive honors such as medals of various levels in their hands, they also received large amounts of gold and silver. This reward system that not only gave them fame but also money made all the craftsmen burn with passion. Under such a big environment, naturally they would get twice the result with half the effort. Just like the armament factory, the quality of steel determined how many guns and cannons could be produced. In the process of tempering steel, with the help of the books provided by Yang Qindong, they could make the steel more solid instead of being so brittle. They could also increase the density of the steel so that there would not be many small bubbles in the performance, which would be easy to explode. Regarding this basic knowledge, there were clear records in the books. As long as one diligently studied, they would discover that many of the principles were not that difficult to understand. It was just that they lacked imagination. Once he did it, he would realize that things were so simple when he looked back. The armament factory began to expand and improve. Batch after batch of Type 81 rifles were brought out and sent to the temporary port of Laizhou Prefecture a few days ago. At this point, all the auxiliary soldiers had changed their equipment. Speaking of which, facing Yang Qindong's inquiry, the auxiliary commander Lu Zhua had an excited expression. "Sixth young master, don't worry. Most of these people have practiced guns before. After a short period of adjustment, they will be able to regain that feeling. Once on the battlefield, they will definitely be able to display their strengths." It was no wonder that Lu Zhua was so excited. In the past, he had only seen the Cold Vanguard use advanced firearms to slaughter enemies. Although they were also equipped with the new type of bows and crossbows, the effective range was still too short. The advantage wasn't very obvious. Because of this matter, the battalion commanders and company commanders below him had looked for him more than once. They had asked him when they would be able to be like the Cold Vanguard and use advanced firearms to kill enemies in battle. In the past, when faced with this question, Lu Zhuo would remain silent because he didn't know when this day would come. But now the Type 81 rifles were given out. Although they were still lacking in functionality compared to the Type 95, especially since they were handmade, there were still some differences between the same gun. It still required the soldiers to familiarize themselves with each gun. However, compared to the cold weapons in the enemy's hands, these rifles were already many times stronger. Once they used these Type 81 rifles on the battlefield in the next war, it was easy to imagine what the outcome would be. Just thinking about it made him excited. Lu Zhuo was still standing there with a face full of excitement. Yang Qindong's gaze had already landed on the commander of the Cold Vanguard 2nd Regiment, Luo Pa. The brothers of the Cold Vanguard will have to work hard for a while. Teach the auxiliary soldiers how to use guns and how to maintain them. And you guys, you must pay close attention to the safekeeping and use of guns. Absolutely do not allow any guns to be lost. Even more so, do not allow anything bad to happen. Once someone shows signs of doing something bad, immediately kick them out of the team. Do not show any mercy. His gaze once again landed on Kong Jie and Song Zhe, the two regiment political commissars. Yang Qindong's tone was a little strict. Guns were not like other things. Once in the hands of the enemy, they could create chaos or even assassinate people. They could take people's lives in the blink of an eye. In the face of such an advanced double-edged sword, one had to be vigilant. This was also why only the auxiliary soldiers were issued Type 81 rifles. The temporary auxiliary soldiers who had not been through much training still used cold weapons. Sixth young master, don't worry. We know. Normally, when there is no mission, each person will only fire 5 bullets. Also, there will be a check in the morning and evening. Soldiers have the right to supervise each other. As long as there is no platoon or squad covering for each other, nothing will happen. The two regiment political commissars said with a solemn expression. Clearly, they had also realized the benefits and corresponding dangers that advanced guns could bring to them. Thus they had long prepared for it. That's the best. You have to talk to the soldiers in a timely manner. Make full use of your advantage in thinking. Once there are any bad signs or problems with the soldiers, you have to immediately enlighten and solve them. Today's matter can't be left to tomorrow. Yang Qindong nodded and said again in a strict tone. After discussing the issue of guns, his gaze landed on the 4 officers and said, "Make use of the time to rest and reorganize. It won't be long before we move out. At that time, I'm afraid that it will be impossible for everyone to rest as much as you do now. So now is the time to mobilize before the war." When they heard the words "mobilize before the war," the 2 regimental commanders and the 2 political commissars couldn't help but tremble. Compared to the Ming army who was afraid of war, they had been waiting for this day because only war could quickly expand their strength. Only war could show their ability. Yes. The 4 of them gave a very standard military salute in unison. At this moment, every one of their breaths became a little hurried. Crimson City. Compared to 2 years ago when Yang Qindong left this place, it could be said that it was completely different. Spacious and clean cement roads, neat and orderly buildings of various types, self-contained and well-equipped new residential areas, all kinds of factories and units, one after another. Looking from afar, who knew how many tall chimneys were emitting black smoke? This was far from the time to care about environmental issues. At this moment, the world had yet to experience the industrial era. It was originally very well protected, and Crimson City was the first industrial city. Every day, many of the things manufactured here would be transported by the Navy of the Cold Front to the nearby areas. For example, items as small as toilet paper, toothpaste, toothbrushes, chewing gum, soap, towels, nail clippers, sugar, canned food, and so on. As large as mirrors, glass, cosmetics, cheongsams, and so on, all of them were best-selling products. They were all in short supply and were sent to some nearby countries. These things were exchanged for countless gold and silver, rice, flour, cloth, and various ores and steel. With the raw materials on Ryukyu Island, as long as it was Yangtze's territory, everyone's life became better. They had enough food and clothing, and their homes were filled with all kinds of food and silver. In order to ensure that these fruits of victory were not stolen and plundered by others, everyone gave their all to push this carriage forward. Chapter 456. One of the branch factories of the main food factory, the instant noodle factory. The factory's director, Zhou Dai, was leading nearly 3,000 workers in the factory to make the newly developed instant noodle. This was the political task given by the 6th young master in a letter. Along with the detailed process of making instant noodle, There were also 2 boxes of finished products. Zhou Dai was the first person to fully understand the book and develop the first bowl of instant noodle. According to the reward system, after passing the political review and confirming that there were no problems with the person and family background, he became the first factory director of the instant noodle factory. Before, when he heard that the first person to develop instant noodle would be the factory director and become the leader of 3,000 people, Zhou Dai didn't believe it. But when he really did it and was entrusted with this important task at this moment, he was extremely excited. At the same time, his admiration for the 6th young master was like a torrential river. No one knew when it started, but there was a legend in Kaohsiung City. It was said that the 6th young master was a god sent by the gods to save the hardworking people and change the world. Otherwise, why would the 6th young master always be able to come up with all kinds of new things that they had never heard of before, or even dared to think about? The ancient people were originally very superstitious, and most of them didn't have any culture, so it was easy for them to be taken advantage of. In addition, Yang Qindong did indeed get a lot of good things that smart people couldn't think of, such as the various advanced guns and cannons guarding Ryukyu Island. With these facts, more and more people believed in this legend, so much so that the Yangxia higher-ups who first spread this rumor also agreed with it. Instant noodle was precisely based on this legend. Of course, this was also due to the big warehouse. When the bags of instant noodle were opened and soaked in hot water and eaten by everyone was full of praise and praise. The higher-ups immediately decided to rush the production of these things. Not only could they replace food to provide food for the people, but they would also be excellent military supplies if they were placed in the army. It would play a crucial role in solving the problem of food rations for the soldiers. With the help of some books that Yang Qindong found in the warehouse, the method of making instant noodles was listed in detail. Then came the more complicated manufacturing machine. Once the machines were available in batches, the production of finished instant noodles would be greatly accelerated. All of this work was left to the blacksmiths in the munitions factory. There was strength in numbers. After nearly half a year of various experiments, the first batch of machines finally left the factory. The moment they were distributed to the instant noodle factory, Zhou Dai and more than 3,000 employees were so excited that they shed tears. They knew that their opportunity to perform had come. He took out the wheat oil and other materials that he had prepared beforehand. With the help of the machine assembly line, the first batch of homemade instant noodles was finally ready. Due to all kinds of problems, the production of the first batch of instant noodles was full of twists and turns, and the machine had to be stopped from time to time. However, as long as the first step was taken, it was believed that it wouldn't be long before a more suitable second assembly line appeared, followed by a third, a fourth. In the end, instant noodles would be popularized and become an important part of the food factory. The latest news about the changes in Chichen City would be sent to Yang Qindong every few days. Once they found that there was a deviation from the track, they would immediately correct it, and then the information would be quickly transmitted to Ryukyu Island. After 2 years of development, the Security Bureau was no longer what it used to be. Their tentacles had already involved various places and even many countries. Just the monthly budget alone had expanded to more than 3 million taels. With so much money spent, even if such a huge organization was handed over to the Southern Ming or Ming to manage, they would not be able to afford it financially. This was also the important reason why the Security Bureau had actually surpassed the Imperial Secret Guards and the East Faction Guards in many aspects. Of course, 3 million taels a month seemed to be a lot, but when one knew that the total number of internal and external personnel of the Security Bureau had reached 50,000, it was not so surprising. In other words, if it was implemented on each person, it would only be tens of thousands of taels of silver a month. It must be known that in order to find out useful information, these people would definitely spend a lot of money. Often it was just a small piece of inadvertent information. If one wanted to be the first to get it, one would have to spend a lot of money and time in the early stages. In this regard, Yang Qindong had no intention of reducing the amount at all. In his eyes, the Security Bureau had not developed enough. His goal was the whole world, and he had only just touched Asia and a small part of Europe. This result naturally could not satisfy him. It could also be imagined that once one day when they really went out, the Security Bureau would definitely be the group of people who would always be at the forefront. When they went to a new country, a new environment at that time, the expenses would really be huge. Fortunately, with the emergence of various new factories in Chichen City, there would be offshore ships sending out novel goods every day, and huge amounts of silver would be sent back to the island every day. This was where Yang Qindong dared to invest a lot of money. This was the advantage of a monopoly. When the things in Chichen City became unique, when the goods they produced could not meet the demand, the power to set the price was completely in their hands. In Yang Qindong's words, it would be a waste to not earn money from foreigners. There was only a higher price, there was no limit. It was precisely because of such instructions, coupled with the existence of a group of powerful people in the upper echelons of each country, that such high-end products were constantly taken out and consumed, and there was no need to worry about not being able to sell them. Developed communication had its advantages, and being conservative also had its advantages. Just like now, because it was too difficult to communicate with other countries, Crimson City naturally rose up. It was developing in the same way every few days. At the same time, many of its disadvantages were revealed. Most importantly, its population was too small. Ryukyu Island's territory was still sufficient. At the very least, it had a population of less than 1 million, and this was after the recent kidnapping of quite a number of people and sending them to the island. Even so, compared to Taiwan's population of more than 20 million in the future, the current population was not even 1/20th of that. One could imagine just how vast this place was. Because of this, there was a large amount of land that needed people to develop and plant. Even though the first Shang dynasty in the north was still struggling at death's door and had not been completely destroyed, most of the land on the island was already under Yang Xie's control. This caused the gap in their population to be a little too large. During this period of time, in the process of dealing with the Huang bandits, many of the Ming dynasty civilians and captives had been moved over. However, there were only a few 100,000 people. Compared to the lack of manpower, there was still a huge gap. The Ming dynasty was still at its peak, and at the very least, the citizens were not completely disappointed in them. Under such circumstances, it was obviously unrealistic to ask them to leave their homes and move to the island. Under the current situation, he could not force others to do so. Otherwise, once the southern Ming dynasty discovered his intentions, who knew what the consequences would be? After thinking about it, in order to solve the population problem on Little Ryukyu Island, Yang Qindong set his sights on the foreign races. Those who are not of my race are bound to have different intentions. This sentence had been proven to be correct in history. However, if he was only using them, then it was nothing. If they were obedient and accepted the Han culture, then they would not be hopeless. On the other hand, if they did not want to give face, then Yang Qindong did not mind creating more slaves. Some dirty and tiring jobs could be done. Wouldn't that be perfect? With such thoughts in mind, Yang Qindong's first target naturally fell on the Jiaoji country. Once the Han people were strong, they would tuck their tails between their legs and behave themselves. Once the Han people became weak, they would be like poisonous snakes in the dark, coming up to bite them. It was truly annoying. Yang Qindong's plan for dealing with the foreign races was to directly attack, cripple them. After destroying the country, they would be thrown into chaos again. This seemed a bit cruel and there was nothing humane about it. However, in the long run, how could this not be a solution? Pain could be exchanged for long-term stability. No matter how one looked at it, it was worth it. As for why others did not do this, perhaps it was because they did not have the ability to do so. Or perhaps it was because too much time had passed, and there were too many unforeseen variables. However, all of this was nothing in Yang Qindong's eyes. He had Dachang and everything was enough. Kuang Ye's secret memorial had been sent to Zhu Qizhen of Ying's sect. Zhu Qizhen naturally praised the compromise that Jiaoji sent out assassins. Yang Qindong's wife was attacked, and then the Duke of Loyalty and King of Min reached an agreement to send troops to deal with the Jiaoji army. No matter what, Zhu Qizhen was the monarch of the Ming dynasty. In his view, the war with King of Min was just a family matter. Even if the Miao people participated, it was not a big deal. After all, the Miao people and the Han people had been together for many years, and they were also a part of the Ming dynasty. However, what was Jiaoji? What was the meaning of participating in this? He had always been dissatisfied in his heart, but there was no other way. Now Yang Qindong took the initiative to stand up and deal with them, and he only sent out the unusable ships and some iron in Sujiang Manor. No matter how he looked at it, it was worth it. After all, if Yang Qindong did not take action, who knew if Songjiang could be defended in the future? The things placed there were likely to become the spoils of war for King of Min, who would not be willing to take these things that might not belong to them and use them to do favors and attack the opponent. Chapter 457. As for whether Yang Qindong would fight with the Jiaoji soldiers after obtaining the item, Zhu Qizhen wasn't worried at all. Not to mention that Jiaoji's actions would attract Yang Qindong's anger. Just based on what Kuang Yi said in the secret report, would the King of Min issue a declaration of war against Jiaoji? Based on this, it was enough to make people feel relieved. Even though Zhu Qizhen would never admit the king of Min's status as an independent king, he would not admit that the declaration of war was legitimate. However, if the contents of the declaration of war were beneficial to him, then it was a different matter. He would just turn a blind eye to it. Since Zhu Qizhen agreed, the following matters naturally went smoothly. After the decree was issued, the southern Ming soldiers in Songjiang prefecture began to get busy. After the decree was issued, Zhu Qizhen seemed very satisfied. Once the Jiaoji army didn't participate, the king of Min would lose an arm. The difference in military strength between the two sides would become smaller and smaller. Once the king of Min had enough time to develop, it would not take long for the chaos in the south to be quelled. At that time, it would be time for him to consider the matter of the northern expedition. However, before this there was also one thing that made Zhu Qizhen unhappy. That was Yang Qindong's physical condition suddenly improved. Zhu Qizhen no longer dared to underestimate Yang Qindong since the incident with Tu Mu. Facts had proven that his caution was correct. At the very least, everything Yang Qindong had done up until now had caused others to have a whole new level of respect for him. It was even to the extent that they had no choice but to be wary of him. Just like how Zhu Qizhen was tired of the Jiaoji army, he was also very disgusted with Yang Qindong and the mercenaries that he could control. Zhu Qizhen didn't know what would happen if the mercenaries fought with the Jiaoji army. He also didn't want to make too many predictions because in his heart, no matter who won in the end, the remaining one might become his enemy. He had to think about how to get rid of the winning side before it was strong enough. For this matter, he called over the chief eunuch, Chao Jixiang, and the commander of the embroidered uniform guard, Meng De. These two were his absolute confidants. Furthermore, their authority was given to them by him, so there was no need to worry that they would betray him. To put it bluntly, the two of them were nothing if they left him. When the two trusted aides were called in front of Zhu Qizhen, their hearts began to beat like drums. They wondered who the emperor was going to deal with this time. Who was he going to play tricks on? They couldn't be blamed for having such thoughts. To be called to the emperor at the same time, of course, it wasn't as simple as just calling you over for a chat. Since they were on the same side, Zhu Qizhen naturally spoke more straightforwardly. You all know that Yang Qindong has recovered, right? Upon hearing this, the two of them understood and nodded. Replying to your majesty, this subject already knows. Men, it's good that you know. He's going to lead his troops to fight against Jiaoji. This is an opportunity for you. The emperor didn't make things clear. This was perhaps a habit of his. He would never make things clear. This way, no matter what happened, they would have a lot of room to maneuver. Chao Jixiang and Meng De were both shrewd people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to reach their current positions. When they heard Zhu Qizhen's words, they understood what he meant. However, their expressions became unsightly because of this. It wasn't for any other reason. It was because it was too difficult to deal with, or rather, assassinate Yang Qindong. It wasn't as if the two of them hadn't tried before. They had even spent a lot of effort to arrange for people to get close to Yang Qindong. Disregarding everything else, just joining the mercenary army was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Even though they had already sent out what they believed to be the best of the best, and even made a lot of preparations for this. However, for some reason, it didn't take long for these people to be found and then mysteriously disappear, never to be contacted again. It was fine if it happened once or twice, but when it happened every time, as long as one wasn't an idiot, one would understand what had happened. Something had happened to the people they sent out. Of course, they didn't know that with the support of powerful silver tails, the security bureau's methods were already not inferior to the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards. This was especially so when Zhu Qizhen went to Nanjing to establish the southern Ming dynasty. They had already started making arrangements. Even now, there were many people from the security bureau in the embroidered uniform guards and the East faction guards. However, because they hid too well and were generous, unless it involved some important information, they wouldn't act rashly. As a result, the security bureau didn't know the true identities of these people. Originally, they wanted to infiltrate the other party's internal department, but now they were the ones who had infiltrated. It was really a kind of irony. Moreover, after the incident with Sumaner, even if she wanted to use a honey trap, it would be difficult for it to work. Zhu Qizhen took in their expressions and wanted to angrily scold them for being useless. However, after considering that other than them, he didn't have anyone more powerful to use. He could only suppress the anger in his heart and say, "All right, I'm not asking you to do it right now. Once the war starts, who knows how long it will take. Perhaps Yang Qindong might lose to Jiaoji, but you have to make preparations in other aspects. If there's a chance, you mustn't let it go. Do you understand? How could the two of them not understand when he said it so bluntly? They immediately knelt down and said, "Your Majesty, please don't worry. We'll definitely do our best to solve your Majesty's problems. It's not that you have to do your best, but that there must be a good outcome." Seeing that the two of them spoke heartily but didn't have any intention of making any promises, Zhu Qizhen purposely put on a stern face, looking as if he wasn't satisfied with their answers. When it came to dealing with other officials, whether it was the embroidered uniform guards or the East faction guards, it was a piece of cake. Even if you didn't do anything wrong, it was still possible to find some things to pin on you. In fact, this was the method used. Who knew how many officials had been punished for no reason? Yang Qindong was completely different. He had an army in his hands, and it was an extremely elite army. Furthermore, he never visited the palace to meet the emperor. This made it impossible for them to find a chance to make a move. The so-called going all out just now was just empty words. Now that Zhu Qizhen had exposed them, the two of them couldn't help but blush. Fortunately, they were smart people, especially Cao Jixiang. To be able to be placed in an important position by Zhu Qizhen and even treat him like Wang Zhen in the past, if it wasn't for his ability, he wouldn't have been able to reach such heights just by relying on his loyalty. Your Majesty, this subject has a suggestion, but I don't know if it's appropriate to say it. Cao Jixiang knew that he had to bring out something useful today. Otherwise, the emperor wouldn't let him off easily. Sir, if you have something to say, just say it. I'm listening. Seeing that Cao Jixiang had something to say, Zhu Qizhen immediately became interested. He wanted to see if Cao Jixiang really had a good way to deal with Yang Qindong. Being stared at by the emperor, Cao Jixiang first took a deep breath and quickly thought over his plan in his mind. After thinking that it was feasible, he said, "Your Majesty, do you think the Prince of Min or the Duke of Zhongdan is a greater threat to the South Ming dynasty?" Hearing Cao Jixiang's question, Zhu Qizhen wanted to say that both were greater threats. However, considering that such an answer was too shameless, he thought for a while and said, "Of course, I think the Duke of Zhongdan is a greater threat. After all, the Prince of Min is a member of our Zhu family. We can talk about our affairs behind closed doors." Good. This was the answer that Cao Jixiang wanted. Striking while the iron was hot, he said, "Since this is the case, this subject thinks that we can contact the Prince of Min and deal with the Duke of Zhongdan together. If he loses the battle with Jiaoji, there is nothing to say. If he wins, he is bound to come back. At that time, we will wait for them to fight until both sides are injured. When they are tired and exhausted, we will suddenly send troops. Your Majesty, what do you think the result will be?" Hiss. Zhu Qizhen took a deep breath after hearing this. If an army had just finished a battle and was about to take a good rest, a stronger army would appear and target them, then the result would be obvious. If that was the case, then the overall situation would be set. The plan was good. Even Zhu Qizhen felt that it was too insidious. However, considering that everything was for the sake of the great Ming dynasty, it was understandable that the method was too extreme. But it was because of this that Zhu Qizhen had to cooperate with the Prince of Min, which made Zhu Qizhen a little unhappy. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen did not immediately express his opinion and was thinking deeply, Cao Jixiang continued, "Your Majesty, the Prince of Min and you are just family matters. Yang Qindong is really different. If we can't suppress him now, it will be more difficult to target him in the future. Once he gains power, who knows if he will be the next Huang Yuliang." His face was still very serious, but he could not help but nod first. Cao Jixiang's words were exactly what he was worried about. It seemed that his great companion had a good sense of politics. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen did not interrupt him, Cao Jixiang knew that he had spoken the emperor's mind. He continued proudly, "Presumably, both your Majesty and the Prince of Min can see the problem of the Duke of Zhongdan. As long as we remind him a little, he will definitely do something. At that time, we can eliminate the problem in his heart and also let the Prince of Min be seriously injured in the process of killing him. It is really killing two birds with one stone." Good. Zhu Qizhen clapped his hands with an encouraging look. But then he shook his head, "We can see this, but can the traitor Prince of Min not see it?" Chapter 458. Of course. But it doesn't matter. The advanced firearms in the hands of the mercenaries are like a piece of fat meat. In order to get them, I'm afraid Prince of Min can't stop his greed. Of course, Cao Jixiang thought of this and laughed. He was sure that Prince of Min would go to the mountain knowing that there was a tiger in the mountain. Hearing this, Zhu Qizhen nodded again. He thought it was reasonable. But there was another problem. If Prince of Min really got these advanced firearms, wouldn't it be a threat to him? When Zhu Qizhen expressed his doubts, Chao Jixiang smiled cunningly and said, "Your Majesty, you can rest assured about this. If Prince of Min really killed Duke Zhongwei, it would be useless even if he got those firearms because the leader of the mercenaries would be there. No one would allow their benefactor to be killed and remain indifferent." Wow! Hearing this, Zhu Qizhen finally laughed out loud. Chao Jixiang was right. Prince of Min was such a greedy person that he would not let Yang Qindong live under his nose. Seeing that Zhu Qizhen finally laughed heartily, Chao Jixiang knew that his plan had been approved. He struck while the iron was hot and said, "In order to lure Prince of Min into the trap, we only need to promise them that King of Shiping will block Duke of Zhongdan's retreat and prevent him from escaping once the opportunity arises. In this way not only will our plan succeed, but if the mercenaries want to take revenge in the future, they will only look for them. Your Majesty only needs to say that you don't know anything, and then you can get rid of this matter completely." Chao Jixiang had thought everything out for him. Zhu Qizhen had no reason to refuse. He immediately ordered Commander Menda to do this. He found a reliable person to contact Prince of Min and make preparations for the future. At the same time, he wrote a secret edict and asked someone to send it to King of Shiping of Yunnan. If Yang Qindong really defeated the Jiaoji army and returned, he would give him a fatal blow. At the same time, Prince of Min also took action. After Qin Tian returned to the camp, he told Prince of Min everything. After much consideration, Prince of Min agreed. In his eyes, both the mercenaries and the Jiaoji army were thorns in his flesh. If they could fight, it would be a good thing no matter who won. As for the 100,000 civilians that Yang Qindong requested, that was even simpler. Just pick some people who didn't have enough to eat or warm clothes and send them over. Once the war started, refugees could be seen everywhere. 100,000 people was really not a big deal. Once he did this, he would fall out with the Jiaoji army. The king of Min, who had already occupied most of Yunnan, Guangxi and Guangdong, had a very solid foundation. He only needed time to recruit new soldiers and digest these territories. His strength would increase by several times. At that time he would not be afraid to face the weak southern Ming alone. King of Min made a decision and Ing Zong also responded. Finally, it was Yang Qindong's turn to make a move. Yang Qindong, who owned Daikara, had long set a goal for himself. In order to achieve these goals, the first thing he needed to do was to have power and influence. He had achieved this. The second thing was to weaken the great Ming's strength. Then he would openly have the power to lead his own troops. He had also achieved this. The third thing was how to lead his army to conquer the world and gain the great Ming's tacit approval. For this step he had put in a lot of effort. Now it seemed that he had finally achieved it. When he received Zhu Qizhen's imperial edict from Kuang Yi that allowed him to lead the troops, the next day, 1,500 cold vanguard troops, 5,000 auxiliary troops, and 5,600 temporary auxiliary troops, a total of 12,000 men, set out from the south of Gaozhou Prefecture, brushing past Miao Jinlong's camp and heading towards Guangxi. 2 days before they left, Yang Qindong arranged for his 2 wives to leave with the last batch of soldiers from Laizhou Prefectural City. This time they were going to fight Jiaoji. The terrain there was complicated and there were dense forests everywhere. In some places, it would be difficult for carriages to travel. Fighting on someone else's home ground, there was the possibility of falling into danger at any time. It was naturally very inconvenient to bring the women along. However, Yang Qindong had to carefully consider where to send them. Looking carefully whether it was the Yang clan manor near the capital or Jianghu Prefectural City, neither was a very safe place. As long as he didn't die, his family and loved ones should be safe. However, this was only under normal circumstances. Who knew if there would be people who would take the risk? After thinking about it, there was only one place that was safest: Zairyukyu Island's Crimson City. Moreover, Sumaner had already arranged for them to go there. As the saying went, an ugly daughter-in-law would have to meet her parents-in-law sooner or later. Even if he didn't tell them about Crimson City, he probably wouldn't be able to hide it from the 2 women for long. Since that was the case, it was better to have them go there first so that they could get used to it and think about what they would have to face after becoming his wives. Were they mentally prepared? In truth, Yang Qindong had guessed that Hu Yen and Madame Shui would probably be shocked at first, then shocked, but in the end they would still support him. After all, women in ancient times rarely had such independent thoughts. Most of them were loyal to one person and would follow the person they married for the rest of their lives. Yang Qindong had made up his mind. However, it took him a lot of effort to arrange for the 2 women to go there. Just as he thought, Hu Yen and Madame Shui actually asked to face all the difficulties with Yang Qindong. The 2 women didn't want to leave Yang Qindong. They were more worried about him. How could he say anything harsh to women who were worried about him? Fortunately, Yang Qindong knew how to beat around the bush. He adopted the method of attacking them one by one. First he persuaded Madame Shui. Then the two of them worked together to deal with Hu Yan. As expected, they succeeded in the end. Using the excuse of sending them to the safest and most comfortable place, Hu Yan and Madame Shui left before the battle. Following them were Tai Qingyi, a group of female guards, and Yang Wu, who represented Yang Qindong's identity. After settling the family affairs, Yang Qindong finally set his eyes on the territory outside the Great Ming dynasty. Only 2 days later the army set out. In the front and back there were 29 battalions, totaling more than 12,000 men. As they walked past Miao Jinlong's camp, the other party was like a rooster ready to fight. They put on a defensive posture. It was obvious that the previous battle had indeed frightened them. Seeing the mercenaries walk past them, they instinctively went into a defensive state. It was destined that such a defense was useless. Yang Qindong's target was not them at all. More than 12,000 people passed by the camp openly. Miao Jinlong and the others breathed a sigh of relief when they couldn't see any trace of them. Not far behind, on the city gate tower of Gaozhou, Kuang Yi could not help but sigh as he watched Yang Qindong leave with the army. He had been with Zhu Qizhen for a long time. He knew his emperor too well. He was a man who hated to see others better than him. This time Yang Qindong went in alone. He did not know whether it was a good thing or a bad thing. But at this moment he couldn't care less because he had to leave Gaozhou prefecture immediately. At this moment he could only wish Yang Qindong good luck. Jiaoji. It was also known as Jiaoji. It was a term used by the people of the Middle Plains to describe the customs of the southern barbarians. Later on, it was used to refer to the area south of the Middle Plains where the southern barbarians lived. During the Ming dynasty, it was also known as the land of Annan. Emperor Qing Zhudi once sent a large army led by Britain's Jianghu as the commander-in-chief to send troops to suppress Wuxia, entering Annan and breaking Wuxia's elephant formation. Wuxia, father and son, were captured and escorted to the Ming dynasty's capital Jinling, present-day Nanjing, Jiangsu, along with numerous Hu dynasty's civil and military officials and generals. After the Huji family was destroyed, the Ming dynasty announced the abolition of the Annan kingdom and renamed it Jiaoji province. It governed 15 houses, 41 prefectures, and 210 counties. They won the war, but they made a bad move. In terms of how to rule this place, the Ming dynasty brought a corrupt rule to the new Jiaoji province. The first was the local officials. Most of them came from the neighboring Guangxi, Guangdong, and Yunnan provinces. They only knew how to read and they only had one goal: to get rich. The second was the eunuchs. Military supervisor eunuch Ma Qi, who was the commander of the Annan military region and the grand governor of Jiaoji province. He extorted from the people. Just the peacock tails alone required 10,000 a year. If the number was not enough, he would capture the Jiaoji people and torture them. Wherever there was oppression, there would be resistance. In the end, a person called Li Li appeared. He worked together with the Jiaoji people to fight against the Ming dynasty army and obtain victory. The Ming dynasty was forced to make peace with Li Li, and the army backed out of Jiaoji. 1431, first month, 5th day, Li Li accepted the title of Ming dynasty. However, this action dealt a huge blow to the authority of the central government toward the southwest chieftains. After which, Shiduo's actions proved that the negative effects of Xuanda abandoning Jiaoji were long-term and fatal. This matter dealt a heavy blow to the Ming dynasty's international reputation in the western region and shook their suzerain status. Losing Annan meant losing the western region. This was something that even Zhu Zhanji did not expect. From then on, Annan continued to disturb the borders. Maybe because they were too poor, or maybe because they relied on their geographical advantage. Once they had a chance, they would disturb the borders and bite the Ming dynasty. Every time such a thing happened, the Ming dynasty would bear with it. After all, they were facing a tropical monsoon climate, so the temperature was high and the humidity was high. It was also a country with mountains and forests, so it was inconvenient to send out troops. If they did not have enough troops, they would not be of much use. As time went on, they did not care and only arranged guards in the Yunnan, Guangxi, and Guangdong provinces near their borders to defend. As they say, if you defend for a long time, you will definitely lose. Not to mention that the Ming dynasty itself had problems. First, the strong Ming dynasty was split into two. Next, the Min king rebelled. How would Annan not grab hold of such a chance? Under the invitation of the king of Min, he reluctantly sent the troops. The 50,000 troops did help the king of Min build a lot of momentum at the beginning, Chapter 459. South Ming was already weak, and Zhu Qizhen's main focus was on Baiming. Along with the chaos of the Huang bandit army in Guangdong, the Ming king worked with Jiaoji, and the Miao people suddenly attacked. Naturally, they obtained a huge victory, charging out of Yunnan and into Guangxi and Guangdong. The war was going smoothly, and Anan King Lili, who was blinded by greed, wanted more benefits. Under the instigation of his subordinates, he proposed a marriage alliance with the Min king. He wanted to marry the Min king's sister, Yongxing Infanta, and said that they would be friends for generations to come. When Lili was given the title of Anan king, he also made a vow that they would be friends for generations to come. However, not long after, he changed his mind. Naturally, the words of such a person could not be trusted. Furthermore, Lili was already over 60 years old, and Yongxing Infanta was not even 20. This was pushing his sister into a fire pit, so how could the Min king agree? However, considering that they were still an alliance army, if they did not handle this well and became enemies, it would only benefit the Yingzong emperor. It was at this moment that his subordinates came up with an idea, which resulted in the matter of Yang Qindong sending troops to attack the Jiaoji army. Especially after Yang Qindong proposed a declaration of war, he thought that he could not let Anan grow too big, and he could not marry off because of this matter. This would affect the morale of the army, and he would attract the dissatisfaction of his brothers. In the end, the Min king sent out a declaration of war, saying that the Anan king Lili was not good. This could be considered a falling out. The moment the declaration was sent out, the most shocked person was the Anan general Ruan Gingwang, who was still waiting for news in Guangnan House. The surname Ruan was the biggest surname in Jiaoji. With a large population, naturally there would be more talents. Ruan Gingwang was one of them. With the support of his family and his own ability, he took on the mission of leading the army. He led 50,000 troops out of Jiaoji and into Great Ming territory. They were weak to begin with, and they did not have enough preparation. The moment the Jiaoji army appeared, they caught the South Ming army off guard. Not only did they occupy the city and steal a lot of gold, but they also captured 100,000 South Ming civilians. A portion of them were sent back to Jiaoji as slaves, leaving 50,000 strong men to form the Han captive army. With that, Ruan Gingwang, who had 50,000 Jiaoji troops and 50,000 Han captives, had a lot of morale. Even when he received news that the king of Min had sent someone to contact the Duke of Baiming to deal with Jiaoji, he did not take it seriously. To be able to become a general, especially one who led an army of 50,000, Ruan Gingwang had some ability. In his view, strength was the most important thing. In the face of absolute strength, all schemes and machinations were nothing more than clowns dancing. It was not a big deal. Amidst this pride, a declaration of war appeared. But Ruan Gingwang was only surprised. Then he was angry and a little angry. He said in front of his two confidants, Deputy General Hong Jin and his nephew Ruan Yongyang, "What bullsh** T Duke of loyalty and courage? Just let him come. I will kill all of them here and see what kind of explanation King Min will give. If the compensation doesn't satisfy this general, then we'll have to talk about it." "Of course. Uncle is so brave. Who can defeat you? It's fine if the Duke of Loyalty and Courage doesn't come. But if he comes, he won't be able to return." Ruan Yongyang, who looked 60 to 70% similar to Ruan Gingwang, immediately began to flatter him. It was not very accurate to say that he was flattering. At least the other Deputy General Hong Jin, who was good at war, did not object. Perhaps in his eyes he also thought so. Feeling very comfortable with his nephew's words, Ruan Gingwang said, "Let's do it this way. Tell the army to get ready. Once the Duke of Loyalty and Courage comes, we will teach them a lesson. Let them know that they are not invincible just because they defeated the Huang bandits. In terms of military strength, we, the Jiaoji men, are the best in the world." Mu family of Yunnan. The three big words King of Shiping hung high outside the Netherworld gate, showing their strength and power. Recently, the King of Shiping, Mu Bin, had been living a good life. During the chaos in the south, the Mu family, who had military power and had lived here for generations, obviously became popular in everyone's eyes. Whether it was Zhu Qizhen, the king of Min, Li, or even Zhu Qiu, the acting Grand Master of Baiming in the north, they all sent people to draw them to their side. This was not long after, Mu Bin was crowned as the first living king of Shiping in the Ming dynasty with a different surname. Mu Bin should have been satisfied with being crowned as a king of Shiping. This was definitely something that could be written in the history books and bring honor to his ancestors. In fact, Mu Bin did send out troops. In order to live up to the title of king of Shiping, he led 100,000 Mu family troops to fight against the king of Min. Unfortunately, he had to return in defeat because of the stupid teammates of the southern Ming dynasty. Then he could only watch the king of Min's forces go out of Yunnan and quickly occupy Guangxi and Guangdong. Now that things had come to this, Mu Bin did not have any better ideas outside of Yunnan. Because once he led the army out, what would happen if Yunnan fell into chaos? Who would be responsible for the military supplies along the way? Under all kinds of worries, Mu Bin did not make a move. Fortunately, his existence could restrain the army of the king of Min's lineage. People like the king of Guangdong Zhu Huili and the Miao chief of Dumang village Yang Wenba were restrained by him in Yunnan and Guangxi, and did not dare to act rashly. It was precisely because of this that Zhu Qizhen did not openly cause trouble for Mu Bin. Although it was certain that he was not satisfied, he was too far away from the emperor. There was nothing he could do. He could not reprimand the other party and cause the Mu family to seek refuge with King Min. If that happened, the South Ming dynasty would be in real danger. In such a big environment, Mu Bin lived very comfortably. Zhu Huichen, and Yang Wenba, who knew the strength of the Mu family, did not want to fight with him. On the contrary, they would send people to send some gold and silver from time to time to maintain their relationship. Mu Bin did not want to accept it at first, but under Wang Ji's reminder he finally accepted it all. Wang Ji was a very interesting person. He was originally the assistant minister of the Ministry of War of the Southern Ming dynasty and had some ability. When Kuang Yi was old and retired, he would naturally be able to smoothly fill the position. However, he was impatient and did not choose to stay put. Instead, he decided to take the initiative to make more contributions and become the minister of the Ministry of War as soon as possible. Therefore, he suggested Feng Mubin to be a king with a different surname and solve the matter of Yunnan as soon as possible. The idea was good, but the reality was cruel. In the end, the plan failed. Zhu Qizhen vented his anger on Wang Ji and asked him to be removed from his post and sent back to the capital of the southern Ming dynasty. Knowing that there would be no good result if he went back, Wang Ji began to beg Wang Mubin of Shiping, saying that he was willing to take the blame and work for him. He also promised that once the war was over with his connections, he would be able to contact more important officials to speak for the king of Shiping when he returned to the capital with the gold and silver. Considering that his title as a king with a different surname came a little suddenly and Zhu Qizhen did not give it so willingly, who knew if he would come after him in the future? If there was someone in the capital who could speak for him and move around, it would be a good thing. In addition, the original suggestion of him being a king with a different surname came from Wang Ji himself, so Mu Bin agreed to this request. Using the excuse that Wang Ji was not well, he temporarily stayed in the Mu family. For the sake of future plans, he accepted the gold and silver sent by Prince of Min. After accepting the gold and silver, Mu Bin and Wang Ji's relationship seemed to be closer. This time, after seeing Prince of Min's declaration of war against the Jiaoji army, he called Wang Ji over and asked him about the plan. Lord Wang, His Majesty has given me a secret order and asked me to make some preparations. Once the Duke of Loyal Courage really defeats the Jiaoji army, we should take the opportunity to suppress them. What do you think about this matter? In the back garden of Prince of Shiping's mansion, Mu Bin and Wang Ji sat opposite each other with a humble look on their faces. Although Wang Ji had done something wrong and provoked Zhu Qizhen's anger, he still had some ability. In particular, his connections in the capital and his understanding of Ingzong's thoughts were something that Wang Ji could never catch up with. Therefore, if there was anything, Wang Ji was very willing to discuss it with this important official in the capital. Now that his life was in Mu Bin's hands, Wang Ji would answer any question, even if it was for the sake of survival. Now that he heard the question, he pondered for a moment and said, "Shiping King, there's nothing to worry about. Everything is clear. Please enlighten me, Lord Wang." Although Mu Bin already had a plan in mind, he still wanted to hear the views and opinions of the left assistant minister of the Ministry of War. Sensing the gloomy look on Mu Bin's face, Wang Ji knew that Mu Bin was trying to test him. After thinking for a while, Wang Ji smiled and said, "Prince of Shiping, the situation is clear. The Emperor's decree also stated that this time, the Duke of Loyal Courage only has about 10,000 men, while Ruan Gingwang has gathered 100,000 soldiers. The difference in military strength is already huge. Next, one is attacking and the other is defending. One is familiar with the terrain while the other is new here. Under such circumstances, I don't see any possibility of Ruan Gingwang losing. In ancient times when fighting a war they paid attention to the right time, the right place and the right people. The more of these aspects, the more obvious the advantage would be, and the greater the possibility of victory would be. Looking at these aspects, It seemed that Yang Qindong only had the right to send troops, and he was at a disadvantage in all other aspects. Under such circumstances, it was no wonder that Wang Ji would make such a conclusion. Mu Bin kept nodding, looking very much in agreement. So, this time our target is the Jiaoji army who is going to win? Hey, you can't think like that. Wang Ji's expression changed instantly. Prince of Shiping, I know you want to fulfill the emperor's decree and attack whoever wins. However, the Jiaoji army is not that easy to defeat. Let's not talk about whether or not we can win. Even if we defeat Ruan Gingwang with King Li Li's temper, he will definitely send more soldiers. If that's the case, when will revenge ever end? Wouldn't we be putting ourselves in danger? Chapter 460. Hearing that Wang Ji did not allow him to fight, Mu Bin was confused. He asked, then what should we do? Do nothing, just wait and see. Unless the Duke of Loyalty wins with a few people, we can send troops if there is a chance. Otherwise, don't act rashly. No one is easy to provoke. As long as we don't help anyone, we will be everyone's friend. In this way, when the Jiaoji army is angry, they will not find trouble with us. They will only attack the king of Min. We will sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight to preserve our strength. No matter what, we will be in an invincible position. When these words were said, it was clear that Wang Ji was indeed planning for Mu Bin. Mu Bin kept nodding his head in agreement when he heard this. Speaking of which, his Mu family had been loyal for generations. This could be seen from history. However, the current situation was completely different from history because of the appearance of Yang Qindong. There were two emperors of the great Ming dynasty. Both of them said that they were the legitimate ones. For a moment, Mu Bin did not know who to listen to. Under such circumstances, who should he be loyal to? Since he didn't even know what was going on, he might as well bide his time and observe the situation before making a move. Wang Ji saw that Mu Bin had stopped thinking about fighting and could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. He was now relying on Mu Bin. Of course, he hoped that Mu Bin was as strong as possible. This meant that he would be safer. However, he did not know that this time he was completely wrong. Everything was because he underestimated the Duke of Loyalty, Yang Qindong. Perhaps Wang Ji's thinking was right. Among all the forces, Yang Qindong had less soldiers and no territory. He should be the easiest to bully. However, he forgot that if Yang Qindong was easy to bully, how could he save Zhu Qizhen from the battlefield? How was it possible for them to defeat the elite cavalry of Watts? How could he destroy the Huang bandit army that was getting more and more powerful in less than 2 months? How could he make Baiming substitute Grandmaster Zhu Qiyu and Southern Ming hero Zhu Qizhen afraid? How could someone who could do such a thing be a soft persimmon that would be easily manipulated by others? If one underestimated the enemy in the business world, it was very likely that one would be penniless. However, if one underestimated the enemy on the battlefield, it could cost one's life. Just like Yang Qindong's troops, after they left Gaozhou Prefecture, they passed Lianzhou Prefecture and Siming Prefecture. When everybody thought that he would detour around Jin and Prefecture in the northwest and have a decisive battle with Ruan Gingwang's subordinates in Guangnan Prefecture, the mercenary army suddenly disappeared from everybody's sight. The mighty army of more than 10,000 people disappeared like evaporated water vapor. It was hot and rainy, especially from May to October when the rain would flood. At this time, the nests of many animals in the dense forest were not safe, causing them to roam everywhere. It was very dangerous. The reason why it was said to be very dangerous was that unless it was a particularly experienced local elder, not many people would be willing to enter the dense forest under such conditions. It was not much different from rushing through the gates of hell. Not to mention an army of more than 10,000 people. Once they entered without knowing anything could happen. If they did not handle it well, it was normal to lose 60 to 70% of their non-combat personnel. In addition, without enough logistical support, no army would take the initiative to enter the mountain. It was precisely because of this harsh environment that Jiaoji was able to remain independent despite its small population and small army. Its overall strength was far inferior to the great Ming dynasty. Hearing Ruan Yongyang say so much in one breath, General Ruan Gingwang nodded repeatedly. Just when the other generals thought that he was thinking the same, he suddenly said to his deputy general, Hong Jin, immediately arrange for scouts to enter the Langshan area and search for possible traces and evidence of their entry. The sudden decision stunned the other generals. After hearing this, Hong Jin's body instantly stiffened and he said, Yes, General. This subordinate will do it immediately. After Hong Jin went out to arrange things, Ruan Yongyang, who was in the hall, said in a questioning tone, "Uncle, you don't really think that these mercenaries are brave enough to enter the forest, right? If that's the case, we don't even need to do anything. Most of them will die in there. Call me General. Also, I am the Commander-in-Chief here. I naturally know what to do," Ruan Gingwang reminded. Ruan Gingwang said in a warning tone. Ruan Yongyang's mouth, which had originally wanted to say something else, was now half open. Clearly his uncle was angry. When the main general was angry, even if you were his son, you would have to restrain yourself. This was the army. Without iron-like military discipline, there would be no way to win any battles. As for Hong Jin, he immediately sent out a team of 200 elite scouts to Langshan. Most of them had lived in the forest for generations, and many of them frequently went in and out of Langshan. Arranging for them to scout for information was the most appropriate thing to do. Go and return quickly. If you discover anything suspicious, report back immediately. This time we don't need you to find out where the enemy is. As long as you can confirm that they have entered the Langsun region, it will be a great achievement. Hong Jin gave the order to the scouts. Following this, 200 horses galloped out and disappeared without a trace. Langshan. This forest had a long history. If one had to describe it, it could be described as a primeval forest. Especially now that it had not been developed and polluted, the number of mountains and forests and the density of the trees was unimaginable to ordinary people. For example, if one walked in this forest, regardless of whether it was day or night, unless one found a favorable position, it would be very difficult to see the sun. This was all because the density of the trees was too high. It was so high that it could completely block out the sun. Another example would be walking for tens of meters, at most 100 meters. In less than 10 meters, one could see thick tree trunks that were so thick that even two people couldn't wrap their arms around them. There were even thicker ones that were so thick that even 3 or 4 people's arms wouldn't be able to wrap around them. There were also many trees like this. From this, one could see how desolate and primeval this place was. When Yang Qindong led more than 12,000 mercenaries into this forest, he saw such a scene. Oh, the forest here is much denser than the ones we encountered during training. The trees are also much thicker. Not long after entering, Tiger's Mane's voice rang in Yang Qindong's ears. On the other side, Beta Persei also cooperated with him. "Young master, the road here is muddy and the temperature is so high. Not everyone can stay here. I finally understand your painstaking efforts a while ago." It was no wonder that Beta Persei would say this at this time. A while ago, Yang Qindong had not seen outsiders for a long time on the grounds that he was poisoned by an assassin. In fact, he had been secretly training the army. The main subject of the training was how to survive in the forest and how to best exert one's strength. At that time, many mid-level officers, low-level officers, and even some higher-level officers did not understand this kind of training. Especially during training, Yang Qindong deliberately chose some rainy weather and when the temperature was high to increase the intensity of the training. For this reason, many soldiers were injured. There were even some auxiliary soldiers who could not persevere at all and were directly injured and retired from active service. Chapter 461. They hadn't even seen a single enemy, yet they were already losing members. This was because Yang Qindong's prestige was high enough. If it were anyone else, even the 2 most senior division commanders, Lung Song and Gao Xiong, wouldn't be able to hold the fort. At that time, people didn't understand, but now that they were in such an environment, everyone finally understood. They finally understood the painstaking efforts of the 6th young master, and they admired the vision of the 6th young master. Just like now, they were clearly in a very unfamiliar environment and it was raining outside and the weather was very humid. If it was the southern Ming army, not many people would be able to endure it and losing people would be inevitable. However, in front of the Yang family army it was nothing at all. Everyone just felt that they had returned to their previous training, and some of them were even more ambitious. They didn't treat this place as a battlefield at all, but as an ordinary training. It was because of this foundation that Yang Qindong dared to risk universal condemnation and suddenly enter the Langshan area, making everyone who wanted to watch a show miss it. The Security Bureau was indeed a department with a lot of money. For example, the news that Ing Zong and Min Wang wanted to take advantage of the situation when the mercenaries in the Jiaoji army were both injured was already sent to Yang Qindong when he was on the road. In front of him was an opponent who was 7 to 8 times stronger than him, and there were 2 enemies who were waiting to ambush him. Anyone who encountered such a situation would be confused and feel helpless. In Yang Qindong's case, he just casually changed the route of the army. Or it could be said that he had only entered Liangshan according to the original plan. He had completely disrupted the military plans in the Yunnan region, causing the enemy to be at a loss of what to do. That's right, entering the Langshan area was one of the military steps that Yang Qindong had planned for a long time. In the territory of the Han people, especially under the watchful eyes of several parties, Yang Qindong felt like he was bare-chested for others to see. It was very uncomfortable and he couldn't use his full strength to display his means. After all, his forces were the weakest at the moment. If his performance was too stunning, it would inevitably give all his enemies a sense of invincibility. Once they had such a feeling, who knew if they would join forces to attack him? If that was the case, wouldn't it be too dangerous? After all, he only had an army of about 10,000 people. As for how to conceal themselves, or rather, how to attract the attention of others, that was the most important problem. This was the reason why they decided to enter Langshan. However, the latter was even less of a problem. Everyone had a pair of combat boots and that solved all their problems. Not only did the path not seem so difficult to walk on, but with the combat boots, even snakes and insects wouldn't be able to do anything to them. For example, when marching in the wild, especially in a dense forest like this, one must pay attention to the cleanliness of the camp, and all trash must be buried in a timely manner. That was because as long as there was a bit of grease, there was a possibility of attracting ants, and ants would attract lizards and lizards would attract snakes. When moving around in areas where snakes roamed, one must pay attention to reduce the possibility of being bitten by snakes. Generally, 70% of the bites would be on the feet. If one wore trousers, forest boots and combat boots, even if one was bitten, one wouldn't be poisoned. Thinking about what people wore in the past, most of them were straw sandals and cloth shoes. Occasionally, some nobles would wear cloth boots, but in front of real combat boots, those were nothing. That was also the reason why the mercenaries dared to casually enter the forest while others viewed it as a dangerous place. As for whether there were poisonous snakes on the trees in the dense forest, when camping in the wild, some lime powder should be scattered around the area to prevent poisonous snakes from invading. Before sleeping, the bed should be checked, the tent should be pressed, and the shoes should be checked in the morning. If these were done, there would be no need to worry. And this knowledge was known by some local people, not to mention Yang Qindong, who came from the army in the future, was even more clear about these things. Long before they decided to enter Langshan, Resin City had already prepared enough combat boots, lime powder, and even some anti-mosquito medicine, as well as food like instant noodles and ham sausages. With sufficient preparations, food and clothing were no longer a problem. The next problem was how to kill the enemy. As for how to effectively kill the enemy, Yang Qindong had already made sufficient preparations and plans. Modern armies emphasized on fighting even when there was no war. This meant that even when there was no war, they had to make sufficient preparations to deal with it. What should they do when war came? Even when there was no war, they had to make preparations all the time, much less when war was about to break out. Yang Qindong had already summoned the 2 regiment commanders and the battalion commanders of the Cold Front to discuss the next battle plan. When they were in Gaozhou, they had already made the final decision. Faced with the Jiaoji army that greatly outnumbered them, they would adopt the plan of luring the enemy deep into their territory and nibbling away at them step by step to achieve their goal. The so-called luring the enemy deep into their territory referred to how to lure the enemy out of Langshan and then take a vicious bite out of them first. It was a rather daring plan. This was already the territory of the Jiaoji army. Luring the enemy out of their territory and then dealing a heavy blow to them was probably something only Yang Qindong dared to do. Only the elites of the Cold Front could accomplish such a feat. If it was the southern Ming army, they might not have the courage to make such a decision. Even if they could, they would not be able to accomplish it. However, this was not a problem for the Yang Jejun. This time, after entering the southern Ming territory, the mercenaries had won every battle. As long as they were willing, there was no enemy that could withstand a single blow from them. Under such an atmosphere, the morale of the army soared. The morale of the army could be used. In addition, after the previous battle with Miao Jun, Yang Qindong had completely given up on cold weapons and switched to firearms. Now, even the auxiliary soldiers were equipped with Type 81 rifles. Even the temporary auxiliary soldiers were using crossbows that were swapped out from the auxiliary soldiers. This only boosted the morale of the army. It was not an exaggeration to say that with these weapons, it was equivalent to winning half of the battle. Just think about it, with the current weapons of the army, even if it was during the anti-Japanese era, they could easily turn the situation around, not to mention the Ming dynasty from a few hundred years ago. There was even less chance of failure. It was because of this morale that the Yang family's army entered the Langsun region. They immediately began to make arrangements according to their previous plan. First, they chose a spacious battlefield and buried the enemy's bones there. Then they began to bury mines nearby. The construction of the first mine took the Red Nest City munitions factory a total of 9 months. This was because they already knew about gunpowder and the theory behind mines. However, mines were still too advanced at that time, so much so that it exceeded the imagination of humans at that time. But in any case, with enough scientific evidence and a real object as a reference, after 9 months, the first landmine was finally successfully produced after countless tests. With the first mine, the speed of production began to increase. This was originally not a difficult matter. As long as there was enough gunpowder and other materials, the mines were produced in batches and sent to the seaside of Lijiao Prefecture by the Yangtze Navy. They were sent to Yang Qindong's military camp. Chapter 462. This time when they set off, each soldier carried a total of 3 landmines. This was because the landmines were still too large. Once the munitions factory in Crimson City made a breakthrough, the landmines would be reduced in size, allowing the soldiers to carry more. 3 per person. Even if some people wanted to take others without mines, 10,000 soldiers would have at least 20,000 of them. What kind of power would they be able to unleash if that was the case? When they found a suitable ambush spot, Yang Qindong waved his hand and placed 10,000 landmines. Half of the total amount was enough to intimidate the Jiaoji army and give them a good start. The landmines were still being set up when the scouts from Lungfeng reported that they had discovered the Jiaoji army scouts and asked if they should eliminate them on the spot. The scouts were all elites, and any one of them was more than enough to take on the previous squad leader of Cold Front. In addition, they were already equipped with silencers, night vision goggles and other devices. They could really eliminate opponents from hundreds of meters away without leaving a trace. It was no wonder they were so arrogant when they came to ask for instructions. Ignore them. Let the army find a place to set up camp and start cooking, Yang Qindong said nonchalantly. Not only did he have no intention of hiding, he even ordered his men to start a fire. This was an intentional exposure. Why did Yang Qindong suddenly enter the Langsun area? It was to give them time to plant the landmines. Since the work had already started, it would be completed soon. The next mission was to lure the enemy over. He could use the Jiaoji scouts to expose his location. Once the order was given, the originally quiet forest was suddenly filled with smoke and fire. This time, not to mention the elite scouts Hong Jin had sent, even ordinary people would know what was going on as long as they weren't blind. The mercenaries are indeed here. Quick, go back and report this to General Hong. The rest of you, keep a close eye on this area and find out where their base is located. The scout general excitedly ordered his subordinates when he saw that there was a result of his investigation. Someone went back to report. The other scouts started to approach the central area carefully. They thought they were being very careful, but they didn't know that their every action, including eating, drinking and defecating, were all seen by the scouts from Lungfeng. These scouts were either hiding in the dense trees or digging bunkers on the ground that were big enough for them to hide. Then they used binoculars and night vision goggles to observe the enemy's every move. They would then use hand signals to report to the nearby scouts. Yang Qindong had already given the order that once the scouts were discovered, they could fire back to protect themselves. As for whether or not this would alert the enemy, he was not worried at all. From Yang Qindong's point of view, if the enemy appeared in this area, it would be abnormal if they didn't react at all. That would attract the enemy's suspicion. However, it was precisely because of this order that the scouts of the Cold Vanguard began to have some ideas. Especially when they realized that the Cochin scouts could not detect their presence. Some of the warriors who were itching for a fight decided to reveal their whereabouts. Then, 1 against 3, 1 against 4, or even 1 against 5, and retreated unscathed from time to time. In less than a day they had killed close to 100 Jiaoji scouts, causing the enemy to lose half of their men. This not only frightened the scout general of the Jiaoji army, it also scared the platoon leader of the Lung Feng platoon. The 6th young master's intention was to lure these scouts to the side of the ambush. If they killed all of them, who would lure them into the ambush? For this reason, the platoon leader gave a military order. Unless they were discovered and their lives were in danger, no soldiers were allowed to expose themselves. Once they were discovered, they would be disqualified from Lungfeng according to the military rules. Once the war ended, they would be sent back to develop Chichen City. Although developing Crimson City was also glorious, and the benefits were also very generous, how could it be more satisfying than fighting on the battlefield with real swords and spears? After the order was given, the scouts finally became obedient. Only then did the Jianghu scouts continue to move deeper into the mercenary camp. Just when they thought that the enemy's morale was weak and couldn't pose a threat to them, they didn't know that they were only able to enter because the enemy went easy on them. There was nothing to write about the battle between the scouts and the Jianghu scouts. At most, they only lost 100 men, which was nothing in the eyes of the mercenaries. Even the auxiliary soldiers and temporary auxiliary soldiers had killed far more enemies. Killing 100 men wasn't something to brag about. As for the Jianghu scouts who were sent to deliver the message, they hurried back as fast as they could. By the time they arrived at Guangnan Prefecture, some of the horses had already died from exhaustion. The news that the mercenaries had indeed entered Lang Mountain and were discovered by the scouts was also delivered to Hong Jin. Hong Jin was very excited when he heard the news. He immediately went to see General Ruan Gingwang. Then he looked at the general eagerly, waiting for the order to attack. They really don't know what's good for them. However, they probably don't know that we discovered their intentions so quickly. Since that's the case, it's a waste not to eat this fat meat that's delivered to our doorstep. Where's Ruan Yongyang? Looking at the report Hong Jin sent over, Ruan Gingwang's lips curled into a cold smile. Then he asked in a thunderous voice. Ruan Yongyang, who was in his 20s, was also standing below. He was staring at his uncle's figure. He had made a mistake in his previous strategy and regretted it very much. Now he was most afraid that Ruan Gingwang would give the mission of exterminating the enemy to Hong Jin. If that was the case, then he would lose a great opportunity to perform meritorious deeds. Fortunately, his uncle was still his uncle. At the crucial moment he didn't forget his family. When he heard Ruan Gingwang shouting his name, he quickly reacted and stepped forward. This general, Ruan Yongyang, listens to your orders. Ruan Yongyang, this general orders you to bring 30,000 soldiers. 20,000 of them are Jianghu elites and 10,000 Han captives into Lang Mountain. Find the mercenaries and surround them to show the might of our Jianghu army. When Ruan Gingwang finished speaking, Ruan Yongyang immediately cupped his fists and said, General, please rest assured. I will make the preparations now. Within a day, no. Within half a day the army will be able to leave the city. At most it will take 2 days to reach Lang Mountain. 5 days later there will be good news. One could not blame Ruan Yongyang for being so anxious. He was afraid that the mercenaries would continue to venture deeper into Lang's Sun. If they were allowed to enter the inner region, even if they could be eliminated there, it would still alarm the emperor, wouldn't it? If that was the case, then this battle wouldn't be perfect. Hearing Ruan Yongyang's confidence and the fact that he had already prepared everything, Ruan Gingwang nodded in satisfaction. Good, go and make the arrangements. This general obeys. Ruan Yongyang turned around and left with a face full of joy. Hong Jin, who had come to deliver the news, had a face full of envy. Of course, if he knew that Ruan Yongyang wouldn't return this time, he wouldn't be envious. He would be glad that he wasn't General Ruan Gingwang's family. Otherwise he would be the unlucky one. Of course, this also proved that in the ancient army, relationships and family were very important. If you didn't have a strong relationship, no matter how outstanding you were, it would be difficult for you to make a name for yourself. In fact, this had always been the case since ancient times. In comparison, it was very difficult for the capable to rise above the mediocre in the cold front. One shouldn't think that everything would go smoothly once they joined the cold front. Ordinary members of the cold front would undergo periodic assessments. Once they found that their physical fitness couldn't keep up, they would be forced to leave the cold front. It was the same for the officers. It didn't matter if you were a platoon leader, company commander, battalion commander, or even a regiment commander or division commander. Once they found that you couldn't keep up with the development of the army, they would be removed. The only difference was that after you retired, you would be given a suitable arrangement. You could be assigned to the logistics of the army or be assigned to the development of the region. This way, even if you were to leave the cold front, you would still have a guarantee. This way the officers and soldiers wouldn't have to worry. However, because of this kind of military discipline, the overall fitness of the cold front was constantly improving. Their physical fitness was always at its peak, which ensured that they were undefeatable and invincible. Ruan Yongyang's order was sent out, and it was just as he had promised. The army quickly began to gather. The Jianghu army, which was already prepared to fight the mercenaries, quickly gathered 30,000 soldiers and marched out of Zhen and prefecture, heading straight for Langsun. The news quickly reached Yang Qindong's ears in Langsun. When he heard that the enemy had taken the bait, he couldn't help but chuckle. They're here so soon. Very good, very good. After saying very good twice, Yang Qindong couldn't help but sigh. Beta Persei saw this and asked in confusion, "Young master, why are you sighing?" "Beta Persei, why do you think the Jiaoji army sent 30,000 people this time? I've prepared 10,000 landmines for them. Isn't it a little overkill?" Yang Qindong said with a look of pity. When Beta Persei heard this, he nodded seriously. "Young master, you're right. Why don't we dig out more landmines? Let's not waste them." This? Yang Qindong despised Beta Persei in his heart. "Young master, I was just sighing proudly. Why are you so serious? There's no need for that. Anyway, the military factory is rushing to produce more landmines. For the sake of the soldiers' safety, let's just waste some." Chapter 463. Sigh, young master's words make sense. After hearing this, Beta Persei nodded his head heavily, as if this was how it should be. This was the charm of a leader. In the eyes of many people, especially those who had seen the development of Crimson City, Yang Qindong had already become a synonym for omnipotence. Under intentional rumors, many people even began to view him as a godlike figure. Since he was a god, it was normal for him to create things that people could not even imagine. Since he was a god, the things he said and the decisions he made were all correct. Since he was a god, how could Beta Persei oppose him? The two of them seemed to be talking about an extremely ordinary matter. However, if these words were heard by outsiders, especially by their current opponent, the Jiaoji army, many of them would probably vomit blood before even starting a fight. "What, we sent out 30,000 soldiers, 3 times more than you, and you're complaining that we sent out too few soldiers? Even if you're looking down on us, you don't have to look down on us like this." Liang Mountain. This place, which seemed extremely bad to outsiders, at least this was what the great Ming army thought, was currently bustling with noise and excitement. Following the sudden appearance of the 30,000 Jiaoji soldiers, many of the surrounding birds and insects were scared away. Only the light rain continued to fall from the sky. To the Jiaoji soldiers who lived in this area all year round, this kind of weather was a common sight. It was precisely because of this that when the army arrived outside Liang Mountain, they only ate a hot meal before moving into the mountain. As the main commander, Ruan Yongyang was so anxious because he was afraid that the mercenaries would suddenly leave and disappear without a trace. If that was the case, it would be quite difficult to find the other party's tracks in the dense forest. Fortunately, the scout general had reported that the mercenaries did not leave. However, from the looks of it, they seemed to be packing up their tents and preparing to leave. "We can't let them go." Hearing that the mercenaries were about to leave, Ruan Yongyang became anxious. Between a stationary army and a roaming army, which one was easier to attack, he couldn't be any more clear. Although it was easier to attack a roaming army, it was also easier to let the enemy escape. Once the enemy was in disarray, how could he capture them in this dense forest? Just defeating the mercenaries was no longer Ruan Yongyang's goal. This time he wanted to completely annihilate his opponents so that he could better show off his ability. In order to achieve this goal, he naturally couldn't allow the mercenaries to be active. Since he had decided to wipe out the mercenaries, it was better to act as quickly as possible. Just like that, the 30,000 Jiaoji soldiers who had just eaten a hot meal sped towards the depths of Langshan district. They wanted to surround the mercenaries before they could react and catch them off guard. Ruan Yongyang's military order was passed down. All he did was say a few words, but the Jiaoji soldiers were the ones suffering. After leaving Guangnan Prefecture, they almost didn't stop for a rest. Instead, they had been traveling at full speed. They originally thought that they would have time to rest after reaching the outskirts of Langshan district. Who knew that another military order would be passed down, forcing the army to continue on their journey. With such speed, the 10,000 Jiaoji soldiers could barely keep up. After all, the Jiaoji soldiers who were allowed to leave the country to fight were all specially selected to display the might of the Jiaoji army. However, the 10,000 Han captives were clearly inferior. Relying on the fact that the Ming dynasty was still in its heyday, these people's foundations were not bad. They were not so skinny that they looked like they were just skin and bones. However, it was impossible to say that their bodies were strong. Most of them were people with sallow faces and muscles. Especially after becoming Han captives, one could tell how much they were looked down upon just by hearing their name. Otherwise, why would they be called captives? The people who surrendered had no dignity. They always ate the worst, wore the worst, used the worst, and lived the worst. Take the straw sandals on their feet for example. They had been wearing them for who knows how long. The slightly better ones, or the ones that their wives made for them, had long been snatched away by the Jianghu soldiers. In the end, they were given the ones that were about to break or were already broken. They could only continue to use them after some simple repairs. Then there were the weapons they used. Calling them weapons was a bit of an exaggeration. Most of them were broken and rusted farm tools. For example, iron rakes, hoes, and other such tools. Speaking of which, they couldn't be blamed. In the Great Ming Dynasty, steel was a forbidden item. The commoners were not allowed to own it. Once discovered, it would be a serious crime. In addition, their master, the Jianghu, was terrifyingly poor. How could they be provided with any good weapons? Even the iron blades and spears of the real Jianghu soldiers were relatively low in iron. At the very least, it was below average. The Han captives, who didn't have anything, now had to continue on their journey. Their morale had long wavered. If not for the fact that the Jianghu soldiers were constantly patrolling and monitoring them, there would have been many deserters. Not to mention their equipment and morale. No one dared to disobey Yuan Yang's orders. They braced themselves and charged into the rainforest of Mount Liang. They followed the direction of the scouts and rushed towards the camp of the mercenaries. Compared to the Jianghu and Han captives who rushed over, the mercenaries who had been here for close to 3 days were calm and unruffled. Many of them even had a good night's sleep. After entering Mount Liang, half of the first day was spent on the journey. The remaining day was spent on setting up camp and burying mines. When all these things were done, only 2 days had passed. The next half of the day was spent sleeping. After waking up, it was time to eat. After eating, it was time to go back to sleep. Using Yang Qindong's words, if one didn't have enough energy and stamina, how could one fight a war? For a time, the aroma of meat wafted through the camp. This way of eating their fill made all the Lung Feng soldiers, auxiliary soldiers, and temporary auxiliary soldiers satisfied their cravings. Yang Qindong also said that this was the last hot meal before they found a new base. In the following days, they would have to eat cold food as much as possible. Even if they could start a fire, it was still a form of restraint. Therefore, if they wanted to eat, they had to hurry. Otherwise, who knew when they would be able to get another chance? Even though they said so, none of the soldiers were really going to eat to death. Not to mention that they were used to eating after entering the Yang family army. Even the temporary soldiers did not crave meat as much as before. Even if they could not start a fire to eat hot food, the meals of the mercenaries were still extremely good. For example, the staple food was instant noodles. Other than that, there were several types of chicken and pork sausages. Even the canned food that everyone brought with them tasted pretty good. There were canned pork knuckles, preserved vegetables with meat, for happiness meatballs, mushroom meat sauce, sweet and sour pork ribs, braised pork, and so on. There were also luncheon meats and various canned fruits. It was really thirst-quenching, and more importantly, it could keep them hungry. Such good food was something that many of the temporary soldiers did not even dare to think about in the past. Now they only treated it as ordinary military supplies. Many of them were surprised, but they kept these things well. Every time they woke up, the first thing they did was not to check where they put their weapons, but to check if the good food was still there and whether it had been taken away by others. These people were really afraid of being poor. For people who were afraid of being poor, food was always the most important thing. At the last moment, they might not bring anything, but the food that could save their lives would always be there. Yang Qindong grasped the mentality of these people and put food security as the first priority. He believed that as long as the soldiers had enough food, they would have the spirit to fight in the war. In order to live a good life without worrying about starvation in the future, how could they not fight with all their might on the battlefield? In addition to their advanced weapons and hard work during training, they were naturally successful on the battlefield. That's right, don't think that you are invincible with advanced weapons. Sufficient morale and fighting spirit, as well as transparent rewards and punishments, were the greatest motivators. Otherwise, how could the United States, which had such powerful weapons and equipment, lose the war on the Korean battlefield? This was the reason why the ideological work was not done well. With so much experience, Yang Qindong had originally received such professional training and had been doing it for so many years. He only needed to move over and use it to lay the foundation for his victory. Just like on the eve of the great battle, when the scouts at the front reported that the 10,000 Jianghu soldiers and 10,000 Han captive soldiers were rushing toward the camp, no one was afraid of the approaching battle, whether it was the cold front, the auxiliary soldiers, or the temporary auxiliary soldiers. The cold front soldiers were well trained and well equipped, so they naturally did not feel the slightest bit of fear. In addition, they knew that the sixth young master was fully prepared this time. Right now, they only needed to rest up and get up to wipe their hands after they had enough sleep. This way, their hearts would be calm and they would have the pearl of wisdom in their hands. This time, the auxiliary soldiers were all equipped with Type 81 assault rifles, which increased their confidence. They could not wait to have a chance to perform well. When they heard that the enemy was coming, not only were they not afraid but they were also very excited. They were waiting for the enemy to arrive so that they could perform well. The temporary auxiliary soldiers also wanted to perform well. They were also waiting for a chance to perform well. However, they had only been in the army for a short time, and they were using cold weapons like crossbows, so they were not very confident. Chapter 464. I say, Dinyo, don't be so nervous. If you can kill one enemy on the battlefield, it's enough. If you kill two, you'll earn one. At most, you'll die once. After 18 years, you'll be a hero again. That's right. Dinyo, little dog, as long as you follow the usual training method, you should be fine. Even if you die, there will be people who will remember us and send you off. That's called dying with dignity and dying with value. That's right. Haven't we already asked the squad leaders who know how to write our last words? If we really die, as long as our family members are still alive, no matter where they wander, they will have a chance to be found and taken care of. If that's the case, what's there to be afraid of? This was the scene when a few temporary auxiliary soldiers gathered together. Not far away, the leader of the 10-man squad, who was also the squad leader of the auxiliary soldiers, looked at what was happening. However, he didn't have the slightest intention to stop it. When one was really on the battlefield, there were some things that needed to be enlightened by others. However, most of the time it was better to think it through by oneself. Since that was the case, it was better to watch them comfort each other and relieve each other's pressure. Sure enough, after being enlightened by the other brothers who called themselves comrades, Dinyo and Xiaogo, who were originally a little nervous and even trembling, were no longer so scared. Their eyes also became brighter and brighter and even brighter. Just like what the other comrades said, since they became soldiers, they would be on the battlefield and there would be life and death. If they thought it through, why should they be afraid of death? Not to mention that if something really happened to them, the Duke of Loyalty of the great Ming dynasty had already promised them that he would try his best to find their family members and then bring them to a very beautiful world where they could live happily. When they thought that whether they performed a meritorious service or died in battle, the outcome was not bad. They even had a chance to obtain a better reputation. So why not fight and take the risk? After being enlightened, the two of them became spirited. Unknowingly, the friendship between the soldiers in the same squad became deeper and deeper. This kind of thing didn't only happen in this squad. In the entire 14 battalions, at least half of the 5,600 temporary auxiliary soldiers had experienced this. Under the encouragement of the other comrades, their fear of war was resolved. Their fighting spirit began to condense and sublimate, turning into a strong morale that was waiting for the arrival of the war. The war was indeed about to begin. The 10,000 Jiaoji soldiers were the first to arrive, and the remaining 10,000 Han captives arrived 5 kilometers away from the mercenary camp 4 hours later. Order the entire army to surround them. First, form an effective encirclement. Then take advantage of the fact that it's not dark yet, charge down. Ruan Yongyang, who had already surveyed the surrounding terrain, issued a military order to his Kiliarchs. General, the army is too tired from the journey. Why don't we have a good night's rest and fight again tomorrow? Out of sympathy for the soldiers, a Chiliarch spoke to Ruan Yongyang, whose eyes were shining. Hee. After Ruan Yongyang sneered, he said, haven't you heard that speed is crucial in war? Since even you think that our army should take a good rest, I presume that the enemy will also think the same. If we suddenly attack at this time, it will definitely be very effective. We will definitely be able to catch them off guard. Alright, do as I say. However, if anyone dares to question me, they will be punished according to military law. This battle was definitely a great opportunity for Ruan Yongyang to perform meritorious deeds. Especially since the weather was still good today. The originally light rain had already stopped at noon. Without the obstruction of the rain, this was the best opportunity for the army to attack. If they could take down the mercenary army in one go, it would be a great achievement. However, if they were to rest, who knew what would happen? Since Ruan Yongyang had already made such arrangements, the Kiliarchs did not dare to question him. They immediately cupped their fists and went to prepare. The general had only given them an hour to prepare. During this time, they still needed to rush to their respective positions. It was truly too nerve-wracking. What? Someone said that the soldiers were hungry from the journey. Shouldn't they eat some hot food before fighting? Forget it. Once they are full, what if they don't want to move anymore? In any case, everyone had been given a certain amount of rations before they came. Although the rations should have dried up by now with the rain that had just fallen from the roadside, they should still be able to swallow it. They would celebrate after they won the battle. Yes, when the army was marching to war, there were not so many rules. Especially in ancient times, not everyone could be equipped with something like a water bag. At the very least, one had to be a sergeant and above. When the soldiers were thirsty, they would just find a stream or even a ditch by the roadside and drink it. Feel dirty? That's because you are not thirsty. Feel unhygienic? Sorry, the people of that time did not think so much. It was precisely because of these bad habits that the number of soldiers in the army was often very high. The combat strength of the army was also greatly weakened because of this. Fortunately, this kind of thing would not happen to the young Jejun. The food they ate was both nutritious and safe, and the water they drank was both warm and cold. Even if the war lasted for too long and the conditions were not good enough, the military regulations still required everyone to drink flowing water or directly catch rainwater to drink. Drinking the stinky water in the ditch was absolutely forbidden. Because of this, there were soldiers who broke the rules and were given a good beating in front of everyone. They were also beaten 5 times with the killing rod. Their skin was really lacerated and their flesh was lacerated. The beatings were ruthless and the results were good. Very quickly, everyone remembered this matter and no one broke it again. It had to be said that there were times when strict military regulations had its benefits. After all, some people liked this kind of thing. Furthermore, Ruan Yenyang had already given the order to end the battle quickly. In his opinion, he had 20,000 soldiers and suddenly appeared in a situation where they were surrounded. Facing 10,000 people, no matter what, victory was already in his hands. After all, in a war, the side that initiated the attack would more or less have the upper hand and hold the initiative. The Jiaoji army started to move. This scene was seen clearly by the scouts who were lying in ambush. These scouts were the most outstanding batch of people in the disguise test. As such, the hiding spots they found were very well hidden. For example, when Ruan Yenyang gave the order, there was a scout lying in ambush on a hill 100 meters away from them. The scout squad leader named Su Yunxing was also a daring person. The reason he chose such a position was to observe the situation on the front line better. For this he paid a price. For example, a few Jiaoji soldiers once poured urine on the spot where he was lying in ambush. When the hot liquid flowed down from the sky, Su Zhangxing did not close his eyes. Instead, he allowed the liquid to flow on his body. He endured it. It was this kind of perseverance that prepared him for the great merit he was about to perform. Ruan Yang didn't know about this. He only saw that victory was waving at him. Especially when the scouts came to report that the mercenary camp hadn't changed much and didn't seem to have noticed their arrival, this young General Ruan was even more convinced that he would win. Since he got the news from Guangnan Prefecture, he didn't take any rest at all. It only took him a bit more than 2 days to arrive here. The enemy probably did not expect such speed. Since they did not expect it, they should be prepared to pay a heavy price. Did Yang Qindong not expect it? Was he not prepared? With 10,000 landmines buried around the camp, what did he need to prepare? What was there to prevent? In order to allow the enemy to surround and attack from all sides, he chose to set up camp in a spacious area. It seemed to be well connected and was advantageous for a large army to fight. It was all to lure the Jiaoji soldiers into attacking with all their might. Otherwise he could have found a place with steep terrain and stayed there. Wouldn't it be safer if he used ancient Mount Hua as a path? Speaking of which, the reason why Yang Qindong chose to set up the first battle in Jiaoji here and use defense as offense was to allow everyone to adapt. If the army was made up of only Lung Feng and auxiliary soldiers, he would not have chosen such a battle strategy. Instead, he would have found a suitable place to initiate an attack. However, when the number of auxiliary soldiers was equal to the number of Lung Feng and auxiliary soldiers, he had to be more conservative. As long as they won the first battle, everyone's morale would reach an unprecedented high. The following battles would be much easier. Because of this, they had to win the first battle. Fortunately, there were 10,000 landmines lying in wait outside. Yang Qindong did not need to get too excited. He only needed to get all the soldiers to prepare for a counterattack and wait for the landmines to go off. As Yang Qindong and the 12,000 soldiers waited, the first landmine finally went off. It was like a bolt from the blue, causing the originally quiet rainforest to become lively. The reason why it became lively was because after the first explosion, the sounds did not stop. They appeared one after another, to the extent that it did not take long for the entire earth to begin to tremble. There were 10,000 landmines. Even if each landmine only sent 2 people to the sky, none of the Jianghu soldiers would be left alive. Just imagine how majestic it would be. Boom, 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 boom. The loud explosions continued. When Ruan Yang, who was waiting for news, heard it, his face turned even uglier. The Jianghu army was not completely useless. At the very least, they had heard about the strength of the mercenaries. Therefore, they knew about the incident where 20,000 Miao soldiers were ambushed and blown up in Gaozhou. Therefore, when they launched the attack this time, Ruan Yang had made some preparations. For example, the formation of the army was to spread out. For example, he wanted the Han captives to charge at the front. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.